Welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, here's your host, Matthew Ablin.
Hello and welcome to episode 98 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the Queen City Music Podcast is sponsored by Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection of boutique guitars, but familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. And Midwood Guitar Studio also has a luthier on staff for all your repair needs. Visit their website at midwoodguitarstudio.com or stop in to see their unique shop at 1517 Central Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'd like to welcome our newest sponsor, Goldie's, the spot for live music and food in the heart of Charlotte's Lower South End. Goldie's offers unpretentious food like smash burgers, wraps, pizza, and my favorite, the pulled chicken quesadillas. And while enjoying food and drinks, take in the live music featuring some of Charlotte's best musical acts. The music starts Fridays at 6 p.m. and Saturdays at 5. Check out their weekly live music schedule at goldiesclt.com or stop in at 3601 South Boulevard, Charlotte, North Carolina. By the way, if you have a business or would like to become a sponsor of the podcast, like our friends at Midwood Guitar Studio and Goldie's, drop me a line at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com and I'll discuss all the information with you. And if you enjoy the podcast, drop by MatthewAblin.com, where you'll find all my upcoming performance dates, social media links, original music, and a host of other information. You know, it's crazy to think that the podcast will soon reach 100 episodes. Thinking back, I've had the chance to speak with some wonderful people, and I think ahead to who I'd like to speak with. This month, I'm speaking with guitarist Mike Prescott, someone I've been meaning to get on the QCMP for quite some time, and the stars have finally aligned. You may know Mike Prescott for his amazing guitar playing with the Hawthornes, a genre-bending group whose music is hard to classify. Mike's unique sound and broad range of influences make him one of Charlotte's shining voices on six strings. Mike Prescott, welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So this is round two. Mike and I started recording, and if you do any recording at home, you know that sometimes computers are fickle. And this was fickle, and we've just been talking for about 10 or 15 minutes, and boom, it crashed. So we're going to just start off again. So Mike's been so good to just chill with me for a bit with it. So Mike, let's get into it again. As we said before we started recording, last time I got to see you was at Confluence back in 2019 with the Hawthornes.
That's right.
And I primarily know you of course, through the Hawthornes as the guitar player, and friends on Facebook, you know, chatting back and forth with things. So
right.
It's always nice to have somebody come over, talk on the Queen City Music Podcast, and really delve into people's history and get to know them a bit better. So,
well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I do remember that Confluence. Very, very hot.
It was a hot day, man. It was a hot day.
It was a lot of fun, though.
I do want to I will probably get a chance to talk about Confluence later on. So, Mike, are you originally from the Charlotte area?
No, actually, but you might say about an hour and 15 minutes northeast in a town or city, Winston-Salem. That's where I grew up.
Of course.
Yep.
Winston-Salem. And then when did you get down here? When you were a younger kid, came here with parents?
Well, no, I moved here first in 1999, and I was, I had been in North Carolina obviously most of my life, and I had a stop over in Florida for a little bit, but prior to coming to Charlotte in 99, I was in Virginia for about 4.5 months. And, I was ready to, come to Charlotte, be around my friends and stuff. So
there you go.
Yep.
All right. And then you came down playing. So let's dig into your musical past though. So when did you start getting into music?
Well, I was really interested in music from an early age, right? So there was a lot of music going on in the house.
Yeah.
My sister, of course, she's 6 years older than me, and my brother being 3 years older, I was exposed to whatever they were listening to at the time.
Yeah.
My sister was listening to Led Zeppelin, Earth, Wind and Fire, the Gap Band. So I'm hearing all of this on
Good
one
stuff.
side. Oh yeah, great stuff. And then my brother was more the metal guy. So he was, was Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, those type of things. So I was getting all of this really rich, diverse music, in the background. And of course, my dad was at that time, interestingly enough, he was listening to a lot of, you might say, Western and country, so Hank Williams Sr., then he liked the Oak Ridge Boys and the Gatlin Brothers. And so I was hearing a lot of this musical diversity in the household, from the four-piece harmonies of some of these groups all the way over to Led Zeppelin and AC/DC, Kiss, things of that nature.
Did you have musicians in the family? Anybody who was even amateur musicians?
Well, my dad played guitar a little bit, but it was sort of 12-bar blues type of stuff, and and that was really before I suppose even started my own music journey. I mean, he had this guitar. I think it was either a Greco or a Gretsch. I don't really remember, but it was a guitar that he kept under the bed. It was kind of off limits to the kids, and he would bring it out when I was I was really young. I was probably 6 years old or something, and he would bring it out, and I would be like, oh my God, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I knew at some point I needed to engage or embrace guitar, but he at an early age, he taught me the 12-bar blues, and then he would put the guitar away, and it felt like I didn't see it for eons, but I guess when I first started with music, it was, excuse me, it's singing in an elementary school chorus. Okay. So I I guess it was third grade. Miss Mack was the music teacher's name, and she, first of all, it was, you had your typical music class that you would go to as part of your studies, and then I learned that there was an additional chorus that you could attend and be a part of. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can fulfill, looking back on it, I could say I fulfilled a musical itch that I had, and I also got out of the class.
No, I'm laughing because I told you I'm a music educator. And it's so funny to me that kids join my choir just so they know they'll take 1 or 2 field trips and get out of school because we go perform somewhere, like we'll go uptown for Christmas and perform at the government center or something like that. Yeah. Or we're going to the Charlotte Knights to go sing the national anthem, and they're just like, oh, we get it. We're going to go do this. That's like almost the reason.
Well, and I hope you don't mind me asking this question. I maybe flip the script here a little bit for a moment. I'm really curious to hear how you got to be the musical teacher, because you mentioned earlier you were a musical teacher. Well, it's fascinating to me.
I mentioned it, but real quick, I said I had gotten in a bit of trouble when I was younger in high school, and the teacher was they were gonna suspend me at one point, and the dean had said, what do you want to do when you get older? And I just said, well, maybe I'll become a teacher. And he's just like, well, I hope you get a student just like you one day. Yeah. So, and then later on, I was in graduate school, and I was studying classical guitar in grad school. Not the greatest player in the program. Probably, I always just joke about it, but it's kind of serious. Like, I was the worst. Not that I couldn't play, but there were certain skills I didn't have that my friends had because they had started much earlier on that path. Yeah. And one of my friends, Amanda, had said she was going to become a music educator, and she advised me to go over to Case Western, because we were in Cleveland at the time, and go talk to the music department head over there about becoming an educator, and kind of started me down that path. I was teaching guitar for a long time, teaching about 70 students a week, and I had to make a living. Right. I didn't want to wait tables anymore. And that was a big joke. Like, I was in grad school in a class called Eurythmics. It's a rhythmic class where you move and you learn about rhythm. And as a joke, I had said it to the professor, he said, well, what do you want to do when you're done with school? I was like, I want to be a waiter in Manhattan. And he's just like laughed, and he was like, yeah, you and everybody else. Right. Like, that's, trying to make a living as a musician is just difficult enough. But, it's also that in a sense, I had that hindsight, or foresight, I should say, pension benefits, health insurance, that these are kind of things you want to think about, and having that steady cornerstone as a musician, and I could do all this other stuff. it kind of is good for me in that way. Like I can be a full-time musician, but yet I'm not, out trying to hawk my wares 5 nights a week or 6 nights a week performing,
It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's interesting. Excuse me. It's interesting to hear that story because, it sounds like we have similar paths in how we went through our, initial, maybe college. I studied music business in college and
not performing.
Yeah,
you just went straight for the business.
Well,
the business part.
Probably because in my mind at the time, and in my very modest and humble mind at the time, right?
Yeah.
I probably was like, I already got this. I got the performance down, man. I had no idea, But I was particularly interested in business because I had assumed a lot of the operational capacities for the bands that I was in.
Sure.
I was trying to figure out how to be a better booker, how to manage certain aspects of the business and the finances, and how to help us get our feet under us, but also to evolve and hopefully get some type of recording contract. And it was by chance that music business came up because I didn't know there was even a degree like this.
Right.
I had no clue. My band was at the time performing and doing pretty well. We made reasonable, amount of money doing it. And I wanted to get to college, right? I wanted to do that because what happens if music doesn't work out? What are you going to do?
That's always the other thing. Yeah.
The parents are always like, you gotta.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I got to do this. I got to at least make an attempt to educate myself, right? A great way of thinking about it as a kid. But so I started to look at local colleges because I didn't want to move. I wanted to try to stay close to the band, and there were 2 schools at the time that were offering this music business program that I remember in North Carolina. One was towards the coast, and the other one was at Winston-Salem State, which is where I ended up going. And they had a music business program. I was like, "Oh, that's cool because it sounds like it'll help me understand that aspect."
Right.
And it did. It taught me a lot. I mean, I was learning a lot, being out there doing it. But this really helped me understand a lot of things that I had no idea about, like publishing. About recording essentials.
Sure.
There were a lot of things that I was being exposed to by going through this curricula that were very beneficial to me in ways that I probably didn't understand or appreciate at the time as much as I do today.
Right.
So that's kind of the reason for that.
I do want to come back to that, but
Sure.
let's jump back a little bit in time and just go. When did you start getting into guitar?
I was really, really fascinated with guitar, as I mentioned, at an early age, but I really wasn't able to convince my parents that I should, be able to take guitar lessons until I was 12. And so I started guitar lessons with a local guitar teacher. I don't remember his name. He was like a local DJ, one of the radio stations, and he really wasn't a serious musician, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. It was something that he was doing sort of as a side hustle.
Right.
It was teaching teach you how to play a few songs and stuff. So I went in with my aim in my mind was to be, I wanted to be the next virtuoso.
Sure.
If I'm going to do this, teach me how to sound like Eddie Van Halen, or, teach me how to sound like Randy Rhoads or Warren DeMartini or somebody, whoever I was listening to at the time. And when I got there, and of course I learned that, that wasn't really his gig, really was not his jam. He was like, bring in some songs that'll teach you how to play the chords too, which was really where I needed to be anyway.
Sure.
But I was immediately disinterested, and I really didn't give it a whole lot of, I didn't give it a lot of time, and I wasn't really giving it, really the proper attention it needed it to at the time.
Yeah.
So that fell off after a few months, and then I revisited it when I turned 13, and I was a little bit more serious at that point. I ended up with a guitar instructor, a classically trained guitar teacher, Richard Madison, who was a very, very good classical guitar player who also had a rock band that he played with at night. So he kind of helped me balance a little bit of the importance of guitar, theory, and helped me to expand my understanding how to read music. I had learned how to do that being early on in the chorus and whatnot, the fundamentals.
Sure.
But he helped me step that up a little bit. And then, of course, with theory and the modes and stuff. So I started to really, it was great for me because, maybe I wasn't learning how to be Eddie Van Halen,
right.
but I was learning how to be Mike Prescott.
But how long did it take till you got really bitten by? Because some of us start playing, and maybe it's, I don't know. I always say, and I've talked about it a number of times on the podcast. I got bitten about 11 or 12 when I started taking lessons, but there was a certain point where you just. It becomes everything,
Yeah.
At what point did that happen for you?
Really
Was it
quick.
when you started? Yeah.
Really quick on when I was 13, it happened pretty quickly after taking
about
lessons.
the age, about 13.
Yeah. Well, I was a little different as a kid, right? I wasn't very athletically gifted. I thought, as a kid, I thought I would play baseball or football or something like that. But I wasn't very coordinated. I wasn't athletically gifted, so that was out. I could go to the backyard and make believe I was Terry Bradshaw or something, but it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I knew I really had a heart and passion for music. And I thought I would be able to manifest that into, guitar. And so when I started my lessons, that was what I did. I was literally probably towards closer getting to 14, I was spending 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day practicing. I was
just playing.
I was, and there were times where my mother would come in and she would say, "That's it. It's 10 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock." And that's all I would do. I think about doing this when I was in 7th grade. That's all I would think about. 8th grade, going home, picking up a guitar and just shredding. And I did. And it really centered me because I was kind of I wasn't really serious, academically. I wasn't really serious about school or being, anything other than just, devoting my time to shredding guitar, and it paid off. It paid off pretty quickly because I those 7, 8 hour, 9 hour, banging around the guitar, as annoying as it was for my parents or whatever, it ended up paying dividends. I was able to do a lot of stuff. I was learning. I probably didn't know how to do it too well, but I was learning stuff like Eugene's Trick Bag by 16.
Wow.
I was able to, get through the Crossroads stuff, the Steve Vai, stuff.
See, it's kind of funny because I look at that and I don't know if it's a different world today or what, but just knowing what I know as an educator now, it's so good for kids to find something like a musical instrument, and which gives them focus. And they find something that, a kid like me when I was younger, or yourself from what you tell me, very similar. We didn't have something that we were focused on. I used to play baseball all the time, and that was my thing.
Right.
But then at a certain point, I found music, and everything else became secondary.
Right.
And my dad used to say stuff like, "I have no idea how you just sit in your room for hours with that electric twanger and just, beat that thing up for hours." And I'm like, I just love it. You're like, I'm getting better. And
oh yeah.
so you're not only find something to focus on, it teaches you prolonged gratification. Now you've got something that gives back dividends.
Right.
You learn the song, you can play it. You're like, oh my gosh. And there's just so much that goes or comes out of it as a person.
Right. I totally agree with that. And there was another part of that, growing up, I was a pretty hyperactive kid. So I used to, parents were talking about I would be flying off the walls, growing up, and I couldn't keep me still. And that was a real challenge for them. You take me somewhere and I'm like, oh, you run around. So even though there's an annoying factor of having a kid that's up banging around on the guitar at 10 p.m. My mom later told me, she's like, you know what? She said, I was willing to deal with that because you had something that took you, all that energy, you were able to put it into one thing. And I had a lot of it. And that's probably, I channeled it and devoted it, I guess you could say, to really, learning the guitar. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
It's a confidence builder.
It was.
Like, I'm good at something.
And that's such a great point because I wasn't good at anything else, at that time. I mean, there was probably, we're kids, right? I mean, how good are you going to be, 12 years old, with whatever. But when you talk about confidence builder, there's nothing like being able to take a song that, you only dream of being able to play on stage and being able to, master it with some level of appreciability or confidence. And then having your friends come over, who, you've sort of always been, you joke around, people pick on you or whatever, but then here you pick up a guitar and you can actually play it and you're like, oh man.
Yeah.
When did this happen?
It is,
I don't know. Somewhere along the line, and it was interesting because very quickly, by 15, I was playing in a rock band. I mean, I had guys were 10 years older than me, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I mean, a buddy of mine, Rick Burton. He was, like I said, about 10 years older than me or something like that. And he lived up the street and he had this rock band. These guys were, all pretty grizzled, seasoned by that time, right?
Sure.
I mean, they're not really old, but they'd been playing in bands and they knew how to play. And so he was like, man, come and, be our lead guitar player. And I was like, okay, say less, I'm there and I, I'm learning, I don't know. I learned everything from, I'm trying to think what Layla, we were doing Layla and then Folsom Prison Blues all the way over to, Sin City, things like that. It was a great experience for me.
Yeah.
And it calmed me down a little bit because when I tell you, when I first started playing, as I'm learning how to develop my technique and I learned theory, I was playing with sort of the intensity of Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yeah.
I need to slow down a little bit. I'm not, it was just one of those things where I needed to be centered. I needed a band like that would say, okay, wait for your spot, kid. Learn these songs and learn how to, get set in the pocket.
Sure.
Great experience for me.
It's real interesting. It gives you such confidence and there's a tier to learning, like, you get to a certain level and you can play all this kind of stuff. And then, well, what's next?
Yeah.
Oh, let me play something a little harder.
Right.
And then, where do I go from there? And then you find different angles of players and things that you want to get into.
Right.
It's such a wonderful journey to be able to do, man.
I agree. And all of the stops along the way there was some purpose to it. Maybe I didn't understand it at the time, even like, kind of we have a little bit of fun with the 15-year-old story with jamming with the guys 10 years older than me. But it may not have been the most challenging in terms of technical challenges, but it was the right challenge at the right time for me because, there's something to be said about learning how to play within the context of a group of people instead of that's different than wanking around in the in the bedroom on your guitar. You're like I'm shredding around, but it's different when you're asked to sit in the pocket with a bass player, with a drummer, and to with intention learn how to play songs and groove.
Absolutely.
And it was great for me at the time. So
you're saying you're doing that about 15, playing with those older guys. Yeah. You get a little older in your teens. Are you playing with other local bands, or are you with the same guys for a few years?
It felt like I did that for 10 years, but looking back on it, was probably about a year.
Okay.
And then I started to, as I was getting into high school, I guess was 15, 15, 16, something like that, ninth grade. I started to meet some of my closest friends, even to this day. And Kenny and Joel, we met at Glen High School in Winston-Salem, Kernersville area. And I immediately took to them. I mean, they knew how to play music.
Sure.
And they were my age,
Yeah.
And I met Kenny on the school bus the first day of ninth grade, and I remember him getting on the bus. He had shoulder length hair.
Yeah.
So he automatically looked cool, right? And he's making his way onto the bus, and he had an earring in one ear, whatever the right ear was at the time, and he had, I think it was a U2 or a Ramones shirt on, or something like that.
We're going to bond with them.
We're going. And he sat down. He said, "Can I sit right here?" And I had shoulder length there too, So we were like, okay, we're simpatico right there from the beginning, and we developed a really quick, close friendship. And of course, he played bass. Okay. Bass guitar. And so I'm like, man,
this is perfect.
Yeah, so now this is where I'm headed, And, through my friendship with Kenny, which blossomed quite quickly, I met Joel. And he was a year ahead of us. But there's a funny story here. I'll make it quick.
Go ahead. Of course. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
I want to know your story.
So when, I'm learning Kenny, and he's like, yeah, I play guitar and I play bass, and I was like, well, I'm a guitar player. I mean, let's get together and jam. So we did a little bit, and then soon after that, I would say within the first couple of months, he says, I want you to meet Joel, and I'm like, well, who's Joel? He's like, oh, he's learning how to play guitar, and I'm thinking he's learning how to play right now.
Oh no,
and he's but he's really good. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, introduce me. So we're in the lunchroom and at Glen High, and Joel's talking to whoever he's with in his grade.
Yeah.
And we're the freshmen. So it's sophomore and freshman. They don't really mix that much. But so we walk up and Kenny introduces me to Joel, and Joel turns around, and I look at Joel and I was like, has anybody ever told you look like Chuck Norris?
Does he have a beard and everything?
At that time, no. But it was where, you remember Chuck Norris in his early days when he was, nice and clean cut. And Joel was like, he's like, no, I don't think I've ever heard that. He was like, God. But that was kind of how we met. And then, of course, from there, we get together. We start hanging out. Yeah. We were hanging out. You couldn't separate us. We were like brothers. We were hanging out probably 4 or 5 days a week. And we rehearsed when we started to put our band together. We were rehearsing 3 days a week. So
that's. I mean, you meet those people in school at that age.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it is today because I'm not young in school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you find those people, they're wearing the same type of T-shirt as you are. If they're wearing a Rush T-shirt, they're wearing a Guns N' Roses T-shirt. Right. You knew those were part of your people.
Yeah.
I could talk to you because we're gonna speak the same language just because we like the same bands.
That's exactly right.
My kids today, at least in elementary school, I see them wearing a Nirvana shirt or a Metallica shirt. I'm like, are you listening to the band? And I'm like, I don't even know. I just have wearing a shirt.
It's a fashion statement.
Yeah, and back then it was a code. Like if you wore that band, that's the type of music you listen to.
That's right.
And today it's not so much, which is kind of sad.
It is, and you bring up a good point because I don't know that I recognized the whole trend with AC/DC shirts and Metallica with people who had no idea who they were. Yeah. They're just a cool shirt. I don't know that I recognized that until about 10 years ago, but it's probably been happening for much longer than that.
Well, teaching school, some of my kids will leave, particularly the older kids. Like one kid was walking out with a Def Leppard shirt on one day. I was like, have you listened to Def Leppard? They're like, no. And I'm like, pulling it up on my phone. I'm like, you need to listen to this. Yeah. Or some of my kids will come into class and they're wearing a shirt and I'll pull up the band.
Right.
Like one of my former colleagues, her daughter's name is Ricky. And I was always tease her. I'd say, Ricky, don't lose that number. And I was like, do you know that song? She's like, no. And I'd pull up Steely Dan. I was like, and I'd play it for her. So I'm like, at least, they've heard, they can't say they haven't been exposed to it,
Right.
And I do that kind of stuff periodically with some of my kids, torture them like that. Listen to old school music.
Well, and you never know what seed might be planted though when you do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it takes a life of its own, and I think for me, even as I kind of continued my musical journey, some of the bands that I started to really gravitate towards, I would have probably not even thought about it when I was younger, when I was first starting out guitar playing. I mean, my sole focus the first few years that I was playing guitar was to be, in my mind, whatever this means in a 12 or 13-year-old kid's mind, is to be the best guitar player in the world.
Of course, we think that, yeah.
Right. And you evolve, and that doesn't really, I mean, at some point you're like, okay, that's not going to happen.
Some of us don't evolve. There's still people on some of these web pages or Facebook pages, you're in the groups and they're like, who's the greatest? And you're like, I'm like, really?
Right.
Are we still having that conversation in your 50s or, 40s?
Exactly.
There is no greatest.
Right. And it kind of extends to when people say, who's your favorite band or your favorite guitar player? I don't know that I can say I have favorites, so to speak. There's
top influences, maybe.
There are, and for different reasons, right? If it depends. If we're talking about songwriting, if we're talking about lead, or if we're talking about rhythm or things like that, there's different folks that I think of in some of these different categories, and even different from a genre standpoint. But when I was, I guess I was going somewhere with that earlier story but
that's okay.
I'll leave it right there, and maybe we'll come back to it.
So I'm curious, how long did you take lessons for? When did you finish up lessons? Did you stop in high school? Or did you take them through college?
Yeah, I was probably taking lessons. Seriously taking lessons from about 13 to maybe 18 or 19.
Okay.
And then, of course, as I got into college, the way the music business program works, it's very similar. It has a very similar track that the educational performance does. I would say education, in that you're going to take your core classes. You're going to study, your theory, your 2 years of theory and the things that come along with sightseeing and things of that nature. But you have sort of this concentration in the music business.
Right.
So so as I got into college, I was continuing to evolve musically, right? My technique, my abilities, my skill sets, and of course, I'm assuming you guys had like the juries at the end of the semester or whatever.
Yes, in undergraduate. In graduate, It was just you had to play a whole recital.
Right. Okay. So in my program, we had to. I think it was each semester you had to prepare, a piece to play in front of you, the professor staff,
Gotcha.
And that was
for business.
Yeah, it was intense. I mean, I was like, man, this is tough. I mean, there's a lot of nerves that go into it, because not only are you really rehearsing a piece, but you got to be able to speak to it. You got to be able to talk about the composer, about the piece of music that you've selected. Why did you select it? Anything that you feel that might not just demonstrate that you have a competency to play something, but also that you understand the origins and the story behind it and stuff like that. So
I don't know. I still have my thoughts about music school all these years later, but I'm curious, having done the music business program, now it's years later, you're older, you're more wise about the industry, and know how much of that stuff that you've learned in music is even current or even applicable to today's music world of music.
Well, there's going to be
is there a lot? I mean, is it just the business acumen of it, or is it are you still?
Yeah, it's a good question.
It's completely upended. It doesn't. All the stuff I learned is not.
No,
really
it's a great question, because you could say that there's some fundamentals that are applicable, right? And I'll come back to that in a moment. I hope I remember to do that. But the way that the question you asked is great, because the way that the industry has evolved, there's the way that people consume music has changed.
Yes.
The way that we record it, the way that we write it.
Yeah.
everything has changed so much that when I was studying the music business, it was multi-layered. You weren't just studying, how to market your band or something like that. You were learning how to record. You were learning how to engineer.
That's different.
Totally different. I mean, totally different. And I wasn't, it was a good thing because that was just such a science behind that.
Yes.
So you were learning the fundamentals, about some of these different things that come along with the music business, right? If you're going to be an artist, how are you going to manage your affairs? And that's not, when you think about managing your affairs, what is that? Well, it's, of course, there's one aspect of it, the business. How do you market your band? How do you, if you're going to be booking your music, how do you do that? How do you manage the behind the scenes administrative operational aspects of it? But also, how do you, when you write music, how do you preserve it? How do you record it? And then how do you make money off of it?
Yeah.
And so those things were very important. I would say the one thing that would, in a large way, still be very similar is the importance of owning your music.
Right.
I learned early on in that program the importance of publishing rights.
Is that one of the fundamentals you were talking about?
Oh yeah,
basics.
Yeah, and
it's funny that I think that's not to interrupt you. I think that's being in the music industry. That's almost a thing where at that time anyway, more today, there's so much information out there today about owning your own stuff. But I think at that point there were so many people who were just ignorant to how everything went and who owned what and how that works. You almost just assume you don't own your music, you just write it, or you think I own it because I wrote it, but in actuality the recording industry or recording company you work for or record for, they own it.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was so important to be able to learn that back then before we had, of course, as you mentioned, today you got all the tools, you got the internet, you got all, everything's accessible. Now, then, it was a stroke of genius, I wasn't smart enough to know, how important some of that would be at the time, but being exposed to it and having professors who had been in, they had written their own music, they had performed it, they've performed all over the world. They had recording contracts. They were speaking not just from, the peanut gallery. They were speaking from experience, of being, having done it and learned some of this the hard way, of course. But publishing probably was one of the biggest things because, anything that I ever made, once I recorded it, if it was being listened to, if it was being purchased or really listened to on the radio waves back then, if you were lucky enough to get your music on the radio waves, you got paid for it, and that was good.
It's almost funny to me. I mean, not to veer off, but how much the industry has changed, even when it comes to recording. Like there was, everybody was looking for these pristine recordings, and not that they're not looking for that today, but it's almost like with everybody recording at home. It's almost like things can go back to being a little lo-fi. Yeah. As an independent artist, you don't have to be perfect. That might actually be part of the style of your music that it, you're figuring it out and you're doing it. And that's part of the charm of it, that it's not perfect.
Right. And you reminded me of when I first started to record, I would say semi-seriously record music when I was 16, 17, started to do like demos, and we go to one of the local studios in town, and they knew maybe a fraction more than we did about recording.
Yeah.
And so you get in there, you go, with one place, based on the comment I just made, I won't mention who it was, but there was a music store in my hometown that had a really cool studio, and the recording started after they closed at night, so we usually weren't getting started to set up until 7 or 8,
right? And
we weren't recording until 9 or 10, maybe if you're lucky. You got to get the drums mic'd up, and there's a whole deal there. But you might get some of that set up, and then you come back the next night and start recording. But those early recordings, I mean, it was fun to go in and do it, but oh man, I had no idea how to even get a good guitar tone back then. I mean, I thought you just turned, I thought you turned everything up, to 10 or 11,
We all thought you needed a 412 cabinet and a speaker cabinet and a
totally
and a head. And now it's like, then you find out years later, oh no, Jimmy Page never really recorded with a 4x12.
Right.
And Eddie Van Halen, all those amps on stage, those were really just kind of for show.
Right, it's a facade,
like, what?
Yeah, it's like your spirit has been shaken, while you learn this. But no, you're right. I mean, it's so funny because when you mentioned that, I remember one of the questions when we first went in the studio to this place. Because it was a music store, they had all this fancy equipment, and I remember, and I didn't know anything. And they were like, well, what, we got some amps out there. What do you want to use? And I was like, well, there's a Marshall 412. Bring it in, and I didn't know what I was doing, and like I mentioned earlier, and the guys were wonderful. They were nice, but they knew slightly more than I did. So, we were both just kind of ham-fisted, when it comes to trying to coax a good guitar tone. And this, if you don't start with the right amp, the right tone, you're starting on a rocky foundation.
Oh, sure.
So those recordings probably won't see the light.
But it just makes me laugh when you say it. It's like, we figured it out.
At some point, yeah.
I mean, nobody told anybody how to do stuff. It's like, how do I do it? I just did it, and see what worked,
Well, and it's such a good call out. When the Tipsy Gypsy, when we recorded our album, and maybe we'll come back to this.
Yeah, no.
It was. Was
that a high school band or a college band?
So,
sorry, I didn't.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to think. That band started, maybe not under that name, but the same group of guys started in about 88, and we ran until about 93 and a half or something like that. So when we recorded we'd recorded demos, some of which I kind of alluded to a moment ago.
Yeah.
But when we recorded the album, We Can't Explain, it was a 8-song LP.
Gotcha.
Long
play for anybody who's listening. It's
go.
called a long play. Hold on, let's go through the history.
Yeah.
So originally in the 50s, when they would make recordings, you came out with a single, and that was on a 45, and you had an A side and a B side. And then later on, they had an EP, and an EP is extended play. So you would have anywhere from 2 or to 5 songs on an EP, and then you had an LP, which were long play. What's the size of that? They're not.
You're going to ask me. I don't know the mechanics as well as you do, but
I forget 70. I forget. Okay. Anyway, so that would be a full length album, and you could have up to like 10 tracks on an album.
Sure. And in this case, we had 8 songs that we went in with. We were on a shoestring budget. I think it was either $1,200 or $1,500.
Yeah.
And we wanted to go in, and this was our big moment, as anytime you go in the studio, it's your big moment. But we benefited greatly because when we went into the studio, there was a studio at the time, it was called HNBC Studios in Winston-Salem.
Okay.
And that stood for How Now Brown Cow.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, it was great. And the studio was run by a guy named John Fiffner, and who ended up being a good friend of mine, who has become a good friend of mine over the years. But at that time, I didn't really know John. I knew who he was. I knew he was a local guitar stud. He was a great guitar player, still is, and he was a tremendous songwriter, producer, engineer. And we benefited greatly from this, not knowing at the time when we went in. We set up the appointment. We went in to set up our gear, and he had us do a run through of a song. He wanted to hear what's going on with these guys. What's going to be my challenge,
Right.
And so we went through the song, a song, we got everything set up, and he came in and he said, okay, got everything mic'd up pretty well. I think we're going to be good to go. We'll come back, tomorrow, and we'll start going through the songs. And the one, as everybody's departing, he walked over to Joel and me, and we're putting up our guitars. And we both were running very similar gear. We had a 412s with V30s in them.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because that's what we did.
That's what we did. That's how we rolled. And we both had, we were running a Marshall preamp into whatever power amp we had at the time. And we set these almost identically. We figured that was the way to do it, right? Why not? We want to just sound very similar. We're in the same band. John walked over to us and he says, "Hey, listen, guys." He goes, "Gonna work on that guitar tone a little bit." He said, "I'd like to spend a little time with your amps this evening." And I'm like, I don't know what to say here.
You could see Mike's face.
Well, hey, I was thinking,
my tone.
Well, right. I'm thinking, who the hell is this guy? But thankfully, and he teed it up, well enough for me to go, okay, man. But I really like, kind of what I got going on here. And he said, "I'm going to be real careful." He said, "But trust me on this. When you get back tomorrow, let's see how you like it, and we can make some adjustments from there." And I'm glad I took his advice on this, by the way, because I
you had no idea.
I had no clue, none at all.
Everything was turned up to 10.
Right. And I mean, I wanted that chunk. So of course I'm diming the bass, probably if there's 10, it's probably 15, or whatever. But it was a mess, and he knew it. And he, that was the one thing he wanted. He said, "I can." The drummer is cool. He's got good meter. He's not going to be a problem. And he's got a decent set of drums, so we're going to be okay. We'll tune the drums. We'll get them, where they need to be. The bass player, he's just do. He'll be fine. Guitars, we
need some good sound.
we got to work on this.
So is this your first serious band, Tipsy Gypsy?
Yeah. I mean, it was. And again, it was Kenny and Joel, the guys that I mentioned earlier, going to high school with, and this album, we had David Kloninger on the drums. He was somebody that came into the mix probably around, I don't know, 88 or 89. We had some versions of Tipsy Gypsy before it became Tipsy Gypsy in probably 87 with a different drummer and a different singer. And we had a lead singer up until about 1991, which is, by the way, when we went in to record this album. It just didn't get released until 92. So. And
then how far after that does the group start to change? Because I think it turns into the Pepper Club.
Yeah.
So how far does it take you after this album comes out till you become the Pepper Club?
Probably not long enough.
Did you not like the name, or was it just member changes?
Well, so Tipsy Gypsy was, it was a hard rock band. It had sort of this, there were two bands, I would say, that were very influential to the sound of Tipsy Gypsy. I would say King's X, and another band called Extreme.
King's X, I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, and I do too. And so those were the two that you might say there was a sort of a framework there, I guess. And with Evolution, we had a lead singer, and he, moved on in 91 after being with us. After being with us for a few years, and we won a 12-week-long battle of the bands or something, and that was pretty cool. But when he moved on and we recorded this album, we were already starting a little bit of a change, even going in to write an album or record an album of songs that we wrote over the previous year. We were already starting this quick change. And I think what helped pop that Evolution off, it really, really started to set it into motion, was the actual process of recording that album. And I'll tell you why. When I met John, and after I developed some trust, after he didn't sink my ship with the guitar tone, he produced something that really sounded great, by the way. I would, through the few weeks or whatever it took to get out of there, probably a couple of weeks, I would come in a little earlier and I would hang out, and he would be wrapping up production on his own music.
Sure.
He had a band at the time called Klubu Clam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that like Kaja Gugu?
Yeah. There's a story I can't share with you about how that name came up, but it's a real tongue twister, so to speak. But I would come in, and I remember sitting down, and he said, "Okay, I'll be with you, Mike, in a minute. I need to wrap up a couple things. You know, have a seat, get a drink or whatever." And he was playing, this music, and I was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" It was just amazing to me, to my ears. I'd never heard anything like that in the area. And it was his band, and they had this sort of, if you could take the Fresh album by Sly and the Family Stone, and you can mash that up with Abbey Road. Okay. It was this funk, soul kind of rock deal, and I was like, man, this is awesome. And now this is what I'm listening to as I'm recording and finishing up recording of Tipsy Gypsy. All of us were.
You're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right. Well, and here's the truth. What was going on in 91 and 92?
Yeah, it was changing.
Totally. And our town of Winston-Salem had not quite caught up with it yet.
Right.
But it was changing. And it was, you had, what was it? Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, and the like. And so here we are with our album, and this wave just comes over the top.
Sure.
And it wasn't,
everything you're doing just changed.
Wasn't long for the making. So.
It is funny you say that, because I remember being a kid, and I'd be playing all this hair metal, and I was listening to it. And my dad one day said to me, and smart about it, he said, that music that you're listening to, it's not going to be around forever. That style. And I'm like, what? Like, you know what you talk about? And
right.
then at another point, I started listening to classical,
right,
because of my grandfather, and started realizing, like, yeah, my dad might be right. Like, this thing, as much as I love it, guys you're looking like girls, and, wearing leather pants all the time, and acting like this. This is a period in time.
Right.
I didn't know. I grew up on Led Zeppelin, and I guess the next progression after Zeppelin and Cream and people in the 60s in the 70s still having long hair was the hair thing in the 80s and 90s. Maybe there was, that thing of grunge coming into the 90s and smashing all that stuff. We're not doing that anymore.
Right. And for me, I think as a young guitar player, and thinking back to what I was very interested in, certainly when I first started learning how to play, it was, I guess, the zeitgeist, right? I mean, it was what was going on at the time, right? And that hair metal, although I pulled from the influence of the musicianship more so than the look and the attitude,
Sure.
I mean, maybe some of that, but I wasn't doing the spandex, and I wasn't, I had long hair, but it was a natural deal for me. I wasn't spritzing it up, and, I didn't look like my girlfriend, at the time, so, it was so interesting to me what I was hearing with the guitar playing of that era, whether it was Van Halen, whether it was George Lynch, whether it was John Sykes, whether it was whoever these guys were. But that I wasn't so much reaching out to discover as much as I was just absorbing what was around me at the time, And so my evolution, a lot of my guitar evolution happened to be just from what people were sharing with me. Yeah. And then over time, I started to reach out and to explore a little bit, and picking up some more of those influences along the way.
It's kind of interesting just thinking about it as we're talking about it and what you're saying. Growing up in that time period and all that happening, I didn't anyway. I'm not really sure anybody realized what a wave was coming and had washed out everything that else was there. And not being in the industry, quote unquote, at that time, because I was going to school and studying guitar and doing classical. Maybe if you were a famous band, because I'd heard stories of famous bands like Rat or Motley Crue or all these other bands, all of a sudden, like, our audience went to half.
Right.
You know, like nobody was listening to us anymore. And this was the thing. It was like being somebody who was not in the industry like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was just watching MTV like everybody else, like, oh, this is cool, until somebody started to name it. And then it would be like, all this music's coming out of Seattle, and we're calling it grunge. And, you know, and it was just kind of that scene.
You know, and we, aside from, you know, when you have live gigs and you pick up a few cover tunes and you play, aside from picking up some of the whatever the song was on hot on the radio at the time, or a few that was on MTV, we weren't that influenced by grunge. The one exception I would say for myself was, and probably because I think they had one fist in the hard rock scene and one foot in the grunge, was Alice in Chains. They were just enough like some of the hard rock that I was used to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The funny thing with that band is everybody always said they think Metallica was the band that inherited the Black Sabbath throne. I actually thought it was Alice in Chains. I always thought Alice in Chains was much more like Black Sabbath.
Wow.
Than Metallica
probably
was.
yeah.
I think they were the.
That's a really interesting comparison. And actually, I have to be honest with you. I don't know if maybe I had heard in passing someone mention that, you know, Metallica assumed the Sabbath throne. Maybe I heard that a long time ago, but I would agree with your assessment. I think Metallica was, especially those first three albums, were, you know, nothing like Black Sabbath to me. Maybe Kill 'Em All, you know, was very raw, the production, but when you got into Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, nobody was doing anything like that, you know, and it certainly didn't sound anything like War Pigs, you know.
It was still underground.
Right.
Like it wasn't, like they're not Metallica. That band back then was not the band selling out, you know, stadiums now for people, for thousands and thousands of people.
Exactly right. And I think once perhaps the way they got there was a little bit more of a commercialization of or pop sensibility approach once they started getting the right production team. And
they probably just started to realize, like, this is not going to last. Like, we've done 3 albums or 4 albums of this. We've got to kind of grow, which is good. Cause I mean, I always say, you know, and I don't want to slight a band like AC/DC, but if you're the same band doing the same thing every album, after a while it gets kind of boring. And I always like to look at musicians and see how they progress and where they go, because to me the mark of an artist is that they are able to change, and their sound changes and progresses over time. Bands that I always loved, a Rush or a Led Zeppelin. You could look at the Beatles. You could look at even a band like Black Sabbath. They weren't the same, you know, writing the same as they were on the first album by the time they got to later albums.
Well, and you know, and you made me think of something a moment ago when we talk about influences. And for me, I had influences as a listener, and then I had influences as I became a musician, and those sort of tracked a little differently, right? So
it's a great thing to say.
Yeah, and I would say that when I was a young whippersnapper and wanted to become a guitar player, and I was envisioning myself playing, it was the early bands like the AC/DC and the Kiss or whatever I was hearing that inspired me to want to do it.
Right.
And then when I started to do it, there were artists that inspired me to want to be, whatever this means, great at it, right? Whatever great means. That, you know, again, I'd nod to Van Halen, but there were other artists along the way in the rock, in fusion, in jazz, even in blues, that were part of my story, my journey as I evolved, right? So, you know, I remember when I was probably about 14 or so, and I was just shredding, and this is what I want to do. I at the time, I remember my dad, he had this cassette tape he gave me, and he said, I want you to listen to this, and I want you to, see what you think, and maybe you can learn how to play it. And it was a tape of J.J. Cale.
Okay. Why can't I remember? I know the name.
Kind of a blues guitar, and
okay.
he'd also given me a tape of Steady Rollin' Bob Margolin, and it was just, I wasn't there.
Sure.
I couldn't accept it at the time. I was just like,
because it was blues rock.
Well, it was more blues, and it wasn't Eddie Van Halen. It wasn't sexy, I guess, for me at the time. Because here I am, I'm in the throes of doing what I thought was I should be doing. Right? I mean, I was
sure.
I was learning these intricate. I was learning how to play the solo for Crying in the Rain or something. And I mean, that's what I was trying to, do that. And then Dad was trying to slow me down a little bit, refocus and I wasn't quite ready. Now, there was one, probably a few months after that, he gave me this cassette tape of another guitar player, and the album was Sleepwalking, and it was by Larry Carlton. And he said, okay. And I'm sure I'm making this up in my head. What my daddy's probably like, okay, I've got to help refocus him. He can play, but you said earlier, the music isn't going to last forever, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to get me in some different directions. And so he gave me that tape, and he said, I just want you to just listen to one song, okay? And I'm like, Dad, I'm looking at him. He's got somewhat long hair, Dad. So, but he doesn't look cool,
That is funny.
You got to remember, that was my little world, at the time. I couldn't. So I did. I listened to it, and I remember thinking when the first song comes on, and I'm thinking, okay, it's a little happy sounding,
Yeah.
But and then when he started to really open up, Larry Carlton, I mean, some beast. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable guitar. Yeah. And even I couldn't deny that when I started hearing him really rip. And I was thinking, oh man, this is good stuff.
It's weird because I think I was very open minded. I just wanted to hear good guitar playing.
Yeah.
So when I got into classical, I think it had to be, I forget what age he died off the top of my head. I have to look it up. But Andre Segovia. So when he died, my grandfather came in with the New York Post, and he was like, do you know who that is? Because they had Andre Segovia on the front. And he was like, I was like, no, who's that? He's like, it's Andre Segovia. He's the greatest guitar player who ever lived. And I'm like, what?
Right.
So what did I do? As a kid, I went out and bought an Andre Segovia cassette tape, which I still have to this day. Same one.
Yeah.
And then I listened to that, and I just loved the guitar playing. And then another time, I saw B.B. King on Johnny Carson playing, like, I guess the band was, the Tonight Show's band was backing him up.
Right.
And he was doing a song called, I remember to this day, Big Boss Man. He had off his new album. And I was like, man, this guy's tearing it up. Who is that? And then I went on a kick, and I got B.B. King recordings.
Right.
And it was just, to me, it was guitar playing. It wasn't so much like they had to look like the guys that I love, because as much as I listened to things like Motley Crue and hair groups, I also was a child of the 70s music. I liked stuff like Zeppelin and Sabbath and Mountain and anything that was blues rock based. I didn't so much love shredders. I liked those guys who had the blues bass. And I'd even say years later, I always say it, like, there's a point, one of my favorite guitar players, Tony Iommi in Black Sabbath, his sound changed. He went from being able to do jazzy licks and blues licks to all of a sudden this metal thing sometime in the 80s where he's like, oh, I've got to go on to this new fangled kind of thing.
Is that around the time he cut his fingertips off of or something?
No, that was... that story's been...
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you mentioning that, because my evolution was probably a little slower than it maybe could have been, or maybe for that matter should have been.
And that's just listening. That's not even just playing, but I mean, that's where my heart and rock stuff.
And I heard Led Zeppelin growing up, and I recognized it. And it wasn't until I was getting into my later teens that then as a player, I started to listen to a little bit more. And as I started going into my 20s, because now they were becoming fundamental for me in terms of learning how to write music. I mean, my abilities to play lead and to shine were only going to get me so far at that time, right? In the small pond that I was in Winston-Salem.
Sure.
And I was interested in improving my songwriting ability, and by extension, improving my musicality. And where John, with, during the Tipsy Gypsy album, recording, really we started to bond because he was introducing me not just to his band, but how is it that you can produce what I'm hearing here? And he would share these albums with me, and he would talk to me, and he would expose me to these different things. And now as a guitar player who had developed a level of ability, now I'm hearing music. Now I'm hearing songs. I'm hearing from the best of the best, right?
Sure.
The Led Zeppelins, the Deep Purples, the Beatles, the Sly and the Family Stone. You're listening to Curtis Mayfield. You're starting to hear all of these different rich music. I started to listen as a player. I started to listen to these other artists,
right?
And other artists that I had heard before I became a player. Steely Dan was a huge influence on me, and it started to show through some of the recordings that I made, and it helped me. As if you fast forward, say, to the Hawthornes, that now you've got free reign to do whatever you got to do, and some of these more, some of these other influences can come out.
It's interesting when you're not quote unquote famous, like you're not put in a box,
right? You
can kind of progress.
Yeah,
I almost feel like sometimes in some of these bands, they need to reproduce the same thing. If you're in a Motley Crue or something like that, if I don't put out this is where my roots are. I have to put it out because it doesn't sound like, they couldn't put out a Sly and the Family Stone album.
Right.
Nobody would accept it.
Right. Well, and that's such a good point. And maybe that's why it's,
or maybe they worry too much about it because then you have bands that were able to follow their muse. Like you look at the Beatles, the way they started and where they ended up in something like the White Album is just completely different, and it must have blown their fans' minds. Like they would do something like this.
Well, it's a big leap, playing the White Album, Helter Skelter or something. Yeah. Versus Love Me Do, I mean, it's worlds apart.
Studio work.
Yeah. Well, George Martin was a genius, right? Were they working with George Martin on the White Album? I think was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was pretty sure that. I think he came in.
I think so. Anyway.
Yeah, I think he came in at Rubber Soul, and then.
Yeah.
I think that's right, and then all the way up.
And they learned how to use the studio, and they were, that was a thing back then. They were. All that stuff was new to all these guys. They were just learning how to do it, and and of course there was a documentary with Paul McCartney I just recently watched, where he was talking about, look, man, when we threw ourselves in the studio, it was just because we couldn't perform live because we couldn't hear ourselves.
Yeah,
and so we figured, okay, well, we're going to do this,
right?
And then they just would experiment, like, look, how can we do this? How can we do that?
Oh yeah, it's fun when you can go in without constraints, I guess. You have the freedom to explore, and some of the best. That's a subjective statement. Some of the best things or some of the most fun experiences that I had was when when you just change things up and you try something so completely different. Pepper Club was a great example. I mean, Tipsy Gypsy was what it was, and it was. We made a lot of money doing it and had a lot of fun doing it. But the Pepper Club was something where even when we were recording, we had created our own studio, right, and had a modest setup, carpeted walls. We would record drums a certain way. We would change things up. I mean, I was evolving as a guitar player pretty quick at this time. I had pressed the pause button on wanting to be, whatever I was at that time. And now, the other influences are coming in. And by the way, I was also, some of the stuff that I was learning in college, I was, pulling from some of that as well. Even stuff like the jazz ensemble, which I was a part of.
Sure.
You're all of this stuff is influencing and having an impact on who I was as a person and as an artist, and the more authentic and genuine I became with what I was doing. All of that stuff influences, right?
I'm not trying to be somebody else.
Right, exactly. And you learn at some point you can't be anybody else. Maybe you can try to sound, or you spend a lot of time, but immerse yourself in who you are, understand who you are, and try to bring that to the table at any stop. And I'm a slow learner. I mean, I didn't get it for a long time.
I just always fed into stupid stuff, like my idols would say, and some of it's not stupid. But I remember I have this book, and I still have the book. It was just interviews from guitar magazines, and one of the interviews was with Leslie Westmore-Mountain. And he would talk about how at some point he was teaching guitar lessons in New York City, and he had this kid come in, and the kid wanted to learn Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
And he basically told him, look, I got better things to do to sit down and figure out somebody else's stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to learn how to play, I'll show you how to play. But I'm not going to sit there and sit for the next X amount of weeks and teach you how to play this song.
Right.
Because I don't play like that. And I was like, to me, in my head, that was an epiphany, like, oh, I don't have to go learn everybody else's stuff. I can kind of do my own thing, which sounds like it took you I don't want to say a longer time, but it took you that period, which is a great period to go through, learning everybody's stuff. But I mean, to get there to be like, I'm going to be doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
And trying to be somebody else.
Well, and the recording process was much different when you have ownership of it. So versus going into the studio, someone else's studio,
right?
Time is money,
right?
All that. I mean, that Tipsy Gypsy it was a shoestring budget. Every song on that album was one take. I think there was one exception where we had something happen with the drums, but everything was one take. Then you go overdub your solos. Pepper Club, when we started to record, now we've set up our own studio, and we have more time. We can start learning the craft a little bit more, the science of production and whatnot.
When you guys morph into Pepper Club, is it the same guys? You said the singer left. You got a new singer, but same guys. Now you're all just kind of changing your influences.
Right.
Gotcha.
So Raymond was our original lead singer with Tipsy. He had left around 91 before we recorded that Tipsy Gypsy album, We Can't Explain.
Right.
And then when we finally kind of shed that skin and became the Pepper Club, it was still the same guys.
Gotcha.
And it was a fun experience because now we're really starting to, I guess, hone our abilities to write music instead of necessarily be the coolest guitar player in my mind, right? I mean, instead of being Mr. Cool, now I can come in with my hair down, so to speak, and I can experiment around with mic positioning on an amp or something. And I mean, for me, it was different. I would say there was one song, Everybody for Themselves, where Kenny ended up playing. Joel he was the other guitar player. He ended up playing bass. Kenny ended up playing Joel's guitar through my amp, but I ended up playing my guitar through Joel's amp, and just stuff like that to change it up. It was, inspired this song, and it was just, we just did things differently. If we didn't know, we said, okay, we'll experiment around, like I said, either with mic placement, something as simple as that, which isn't really that simple.
Sure.
But, or maybe, I'll play bass on a song instead of guitar. Or maybe in one song that we did, a song called Spot. Spot is my dog. I took a whammy bar and I used it to play slide guitar on it because I didn't have a slide at the time, I was like, but I'm hearing the slide, on this song. So I took this thing off, and I'm like, it took me a few takes to get it because I didn't know nothing about playing slide guitar, but I play it and I pull it off, but it was just things like that, and we were just
experimenting.
Oh yeah, man, we had a bathroom that, we heard that was it Zeppelin that ended up, recording drums in this large,
right? Yeah,
and you get all that beautiful reverb. And so Joel said, hey, listen, man, I want to put you in the bathroom with your guitar, your acoustic.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so you go in there and you get your headsets, putting things under this. Thankfully, it was a small bathroom, but it still had enough of that reverb and the ambiance, when you were playing the acoustic. It's like, oh, that sounds great, I mean, what we thought sounded great at the time, but it was just stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. Was no, inhibitions aside or whatever. We really dialed in, and kind of an interesting thing happened. Not only were we writing some songs that I think were better probably and maybe more genuine and authentic,
right.
but there was sort of this, you might say, diversion. I want to find a softer way to say it, but I was going in a slightly different direction,
right?
And Joel and Kenny were somewhat in lockstep. They were still this rock element that was pervasive, and it were really good at it, and I was like, man, there's something else inside that needs to come out. So it eventually went kind of like this. And sometimes that happens, you kind of, people start going in slightly different directions.
Were you guys in Florida at that time? Because you guys, why did you move down to Florida if you had all this stuff going on here?
So
I mean, music's changing. Did you figure we should change states? I mean, let's get out of here.
It's a funny story. Well, so we were playing a show. My sock keeps coming off. Sorry. For those that don't know, I'm not wearing any shoes. Okay. So we're playing this show in Greensboro at a place called the Blind Tiger.
Oh, yeah. I remember it.
Yeah.
It's the first place I saw Eric Gales.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, there you go. Eric Gales, great guitar player. Has got some stories about Eric and LaDonna. We're friends with LaDonna, known her for a long time. She's a great person, by the way. First saw Eric when he was 15. So
nice.
And a few years ago, he had a private birthday party that I was able to go to and hang out. It was a really good experience. Maybe we'll come back to that. So, Blind Tiger, 96 or something like this, I guess. And 95 or 96, one of those 2 years. And we're playing this show. We had 2 sets. And during the intermission, a guy came up to us, and it was, pretty packed place. And he was like, "Oh man, you guys sound great. Hey, my name is, Ruben Salas, and I'm with Ted Scorman, T Scorman out of Orlando. And, we manage bands, we book bands, all that stuff like this. And I see lots of potential, and I was thinking, okay, this sounds good. He did a wonderful salesman job. He hooked us in, and he convinced us that maybe we should move, and that's exactly what we did. There's a lot behind that, but long story short, we were convinced that this was the right thing to do. So we loaded up the truck and we moved to Orlando.
Okay.
And we were there for about 9 months. That was our home base.
Because all the famous rock musicians come out of Orlando. That's interesting.
Probably the first sign that maybe it wasn't a well thought out decision was the first day that we got down to Orlando, and Ruben came out to the parking lot to meet us. I said, "Come on up in the studio," to my office. We get up there, and he's talking to us a little bit about, so you guys, you decided to come on down. It's great. And so, they're like, yeah, we started to go in to telling him what we had to do to make it down to Orlando. We're explaining that, well, we all had daytime jobs. We were making, whatever. We had cars and all this. And we were playing music, and we had steady schedule. And we were selling all this and quitting our jobs. And we came to Orlando. And as we're sharing this with him, his face is going from to... And he looked at us and goes, "You did all of that?" And the way it was delivered was like, oh man, okay.
I just screwed up these guys' whole lives.
Well, and we're thinking, what did we do? I mean, I'm thinking that when I see his reaction and that question, I'm thinking, what do you mean we did all of that? We did, you said, hey man, come on down to Orlando, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, it was something else.
You guys didn't do a lot of research, it sounds like.
What? Research? What are you talking about, man? Come
Wow.
on. Research, yeah. No, I was...
that's back in the days when there was no internet or
let
it
me
was
tell
just
you,
starting.
man. Well, he was, you know, he was a really, I'll say, there was maybe equal parts of naivety and good salesman, right? Great salesman or good salesman that he was, and the naivety maybe of us or me. I won't speak for the
Wishful
other guys.
thinking on your guys' part too.
Totally.
This guy said, "This is what we got to do. We're coming down there."
You know, I'm going to help you. You know, you're going to reach the stars, or whatever he said. You know, at the time that was enough for us to make that move.
Wow.
And you know, and really, when we got down there, he did keep us busy. I mean, we played some pretty cool shows. You know, the Universal Studios thing. It was a Mardi Gras, so it was in front of 8,000-10,000 people. It was a great show. There were some good shows.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of money overall. I mean, in aggregate, you know, we were making more, you know, in the North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia area than we were making when we went down to Florida, because the first couple of months we were doing nothing but the Florida scene. We were Orlando, Jacksonville, you know, Fernandina Beach. You know, we had a circuit that we had, you know.
I love hearing this stuff because it's the kind of thing that you don't hear.
Yeah.
Like you hear about famous bands and, oh yeah, I trudged out, but you don't really hear. You know what I mean?
Well,
you hear the big, I hashed out in the clubs for 10 years before we made it. And they don't really know what that really means.
They don't have a clue. And I maybe I mentioned this. I don't know if we caught it on this round or not, but it, you know, not everyone's built for the road like that. It is a very thankless job a lot of the times.
It seems glamorous, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, you know, there's the perception when you see somebody on stage in regalia, they pick up their instruments, they play, they get through their set, their 2 sets or 3 sets or whatever, and then, you know, you don't see them until they come to town again the next time. But everything outside of the 4 walls of the club you're playing or the venue, and outside the 4 walls of the practice space, you have to be built for that type of life to be able to succeed and thrive in it. It takes a very special type of mentality, patience, and I'm not afraid to say I didn't have it. I mean, I wasn't built for that, and it probably didn't help that I think the term I say this sort of in jest, but it's truth in jest, right? There's something to be said for being. We were, I guess you might say, domesticated in some way before we went out onto the road and tried to, with what sounds like reckless abandon in a way. You know, you go out there and you think this is going to be the real deal.
I don't. I'm kind of like you. I mean, I said it years ago. I'm glad that's not something that ever happened to me, because not that I ever went on tour. I mean, but I remember at some point I went on a 2-week cross-country trip with an old girlfriend of mine, sleeping in beds, hotels, dumpy hotels, because we didn't have any money. And I wasn't going to rack up thousands of dollars in debt, you know, staying in hotels and food on the road and this and that. And then you just realize you're like, it was a wonderful 2-week experience, but like, I wouldn't want to do that as a musician every day. And I have friends who do, but I just would not want to do it.
It's tough. And I think when you add in, when you have shows like American Idol and other things like that, I think people get a false impression that that's how it works, you know, that you're gonna
they have no clue.
Yeah, you're gonna get on stage, you're gonna sing, you're gonna win a competition, and you're gonna become, you know, it's all milk and cookies or peaches and sun or whatever. It's very, very tough. It's brutal life, and there's a lot of things that you pick up along the way that shape who you are. And honestly, like I said, maybe my perception of picking up shop and moving to Orlando would have been different had I not established myself in some regard, and set up roots at home before I did that. You kind of, like I said, you say, okay, well, I've been sold. I'm going to go down here and do it. You move. It doesn't work out. It worked out in some regard. We stayed busy. We made a little money. We were, had some write-ups and all that good stuff. And then you come back home. And what do you do after that? And, you pick up the pieces. For me, then it wasn't long after that I started exploring something a bit differently musically. And I took a couple of months to kind of, take a breath. Yeah. But then I got thrust into the next project, which was Black Rain, Yeah. And so, but it was it was something that taught me a lot. One of the interesting story for our time in Orlando, when we got down there, to Ruben's credit, he did, keep us busy, and he made sure we had a place to rehearse, a climate controlled storage facility. And he said, hey, I need you to come meet the other band, because there's two bands. You have a 1/4 inch of drywall between your two rooms. So you're going to have to meet them, negotiate your schedules. You're not going to be able to practice at the same time. So no problem. So he brings us down to the storage facility, and the band pulls up, and he said, hey, here's the guys, this is Rob and Mike and all this good stuff. And you meet each other, and you start, we start planning our schedules out. They'll come in on this day, and maybe we both come in on the same day. They come in at this time, we come in at this time. That's how a lot of it worked.
Sure.
And we started to develop a pretty good friendship with these guys, and they had just been signed to a subsidiary, I believe it was Atlantic, and they were known at that time as Tabitha's Secret. And they were cool. We hung out. Got a lead singer's name was Rob, and he hung out with us a good bit. And guitar player hung out. He really liked what we were doing guitar wise, so we hung out with him too. But anyway, after we pack up and head back months forward, we're done. We're ready. Got to get out of Orlando. Got to get out of Florida. So we head back home, and maybe a month after we get back, I'm listening to the radio, and I'm hearing the song, and I was like, man, this song sounds so familiar.
Tabitha's Secret?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was like, I called Joel, and I said, Joel, why does this song, how does it go? I want to push you around, or what's
yeah.
And I was like, what?
Push.
Why does this song sound so familiar? And he said, that was the band that practiced next door to us. I was like, what, really? Matchbox 20? That was them? He's like, yeah, that was them. So that was who we were practicing beside.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Kind of an interesting story.
Interesting. Wow.
I had no idea at the time. Here they are. There, and when they rehearsed that song, that was one of the songs.
Sure.
But yeah, it's kind of a small world,
Yeah.
But yeah.
If you're touring and you're doing it, you're going to meet other musicians.
Right.
And at some point you'll.
Well, this was right before they broke.
Right.
When we were rehearsing with them, maybe I don't know what their story is, to tell you the truth, but something had to have happened in the months after we, met them and then got back home.
We got to change the name. It's not going to work.
Well, and I think what happened, to tell you the truth, I think maybe they had just changed the name from Tabitha Secret to Matchbox 20.
Gotcha.
Maybe that's what it was. I don't remember, but what an interesting story, right?
Yeah, that is great, man.
Kind of neat,
So, all right. So you pack it up, you got it through the road, you come back to North Carolina, and you jump into a project, the Black Rain project, and you co-found the group with Walter Charles.
Well, I did join the band, but I was not a co-founder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. That band actually was co-founded by Walter Charles, who I refer to as Charles, or Chuck. and another guy named Tony Diaz.
Okay.
And Tony Diaz, he actually was, co-founded another band around town called Groove 8. So
I've heard that, Groove 8.
Yeah. They're fairly established around the Charlotte area. But yeah, I mean, interesting story. I'm working part-time at Kinko's.
Good.
In Winston-Salem. Yeah, man, it's great.
Not around anymore, though.
Yeah, no, FedEx office or something like that. But at the time, man, what a cool, funky, collection of people that worked in, Kinko's. I mean, artists, actors, visual artists, musicians, just a really neat little group of people. And so it was I say unserious in that I wasn't, we weren't trying to be the CEO or the vice president. We were there to, get through.
Do your job, make me some money, and go home.
And play music at night or whatever, or draw, billboards. So I'm working the counter, and these two guys walk in, and one was Walter, the other was Tony, Charles and Tony. And Charles is he was a big guy. He was about 6'4", 6'5",
mm-hmm.
and he had long hair pulled back in a ponytail. And I'm thinking, these guys are pretty big. So I say, hey, what's going on? What can I help you with? We need to get some flyers made for an upcoming show. And I was like, oh, well, now you're speaking my language, So they pulled out the flyers, and it was a band called Black Rain. I was like, Black Rain, I've heard of you guys. My dad's seen you before, and he told me about you guys. And he saw you perform at a club called Beatty's in Winston-Salem, which at that time was owned by a good friend of my dad's.
Okay.
And so my dad had seen him a couple times, and he had told me, he said, you need to, meet these guys. You need to, be involved with them somehow. And I'm like, well, Dad, I got my own band. At the time I had Pepper Club, right? Sure. So anyway, so here they are. They're coming to get some copies made, flyers, and I'm chit-chatting. At the end of the chit-chat, here's your flyers. You don't need a guitar player, do you? And they're like, well, we already got a guitar player, and but come out and see us, hang out with us. It'll be cool. All right, cool. 4 weeks later, I get a call at the store, and I pick up the phone, and they call me and said, Mike, you got a call. I'm like, who's calling me at work? And it was Charles. And Charles is on the other line. He said, hey, man, this is Charles with Black Rain. You may remember we were in there a few weeks ago getting some flyers made. Oh, yeah, how you doing, man? Everything's good? Oh, yeah. Yes. You mentioned, you asked a question. We're in there, were we looking for a guitar player? He said, well, we are now. Are you still interested? And I was like, well, sure, yeah, come on. I mean, I'd never heard a song by them at this point. It was sort of.
What kind of music was it?
Well, it was an interesting sound. So they blended sort of like soul, and this was the band that were. So Charles, I said, cool, come, I'm interested. Yeah. He brings by a CD. And him and Tony came in. They, gave me the pitch, and they brought me a bio, and I got a chance to see, who the players were. And they said, "Here's the CD. It's a 4-song CD. We got other songs. It was EP, 4-song, and we're going to, we got other songs too, but these are the ones we want you to start learning. Come to rehearsal. We're going to try you out. Cool, no problem." So I go home and listen to it, and first time I've heard anything from them, and it was very unique. It was like this blend of world beat, a little bit of soul, a little bit of rock, a little bit of ska. I mean, it was, and that was because everybody was coming from these different angles, you know what I'm saying? Right. And it was really neat. Charles has sort of a, you might say a Seal type of Ephraim Lewis, Peter Gabriel type of Sting type of, right. This European type of flavor to his songwriting, his melodic sensibilities. Okay. And so you had that, and you had this drummer who was a guy named Brian Capps, who coincidentally, he left right before they came to pitch, the project to me.
Gotcha.
He left, and he tried out for Pepper Club when our drummer left towards the end of the deal. So I knew Brian, but he wasn't part of the gig at that time. Really good percussion player, and like I said, had this sort of almost Stuart Copeland type of vibe going on to the music. So what I'm hearing, and the guitar player is a guy named Brian Finucane, who had this sort of Randy Rhoads type of Tony Iommi type of sound, if that makes sense. Really good guitar player, but totally unusual for what I was hearing. It was like this interesting collage. The sax player was Eric Payne, really good sax player, and so all of this stuff. And I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, man, this is pretty intricate, And so I came to the rehearsal. I rehearsed Eric. The sax player wasn't there that first rehearsal, but I got a chance to really. The songs were. I was able to pick them up pretty quickly and come in and rehearse them, and they offered me the gig, and so we were off to the races.
Okay.
Had to learn close to 15 songs in about 3 weeks. We had first gig I had with them was Alive After 5 in Winston-Salem.
Gotcha.
And these were, during the week they would
all just the original stuff they played, or did they do covers?
So mostly original. We had to learn a few cover songs. I think we did Little Wing.
Okay.
And then No Woman, No Cry, or one of the Marley tunes. I can't remember.
Did you do
Redemption Song. That's what it was.
Did you do any recordings with them? Or did you like the original stuff, or did you just primarily come in and do their stuff?
So I came in and had to learn the catalog. And we reworked some things because, my style is a little different.
Sure.
And then we wrote some of our own songs together.
Okay.
And then fast forward a couple of years, we recorded an album called One. And unfortunately, it never really made it out of pre-production. We went into the studio.
Differences of opinion, or people just...
Yeah, but I think, any of the things you could imagine that might happen, in a band situation,
Sure.
Things change, people's timing change, interesting, personalities shift. People, maybe they're interested in exploring a different path.
Yeah.
It was unfortunate because I think in some ways, and this is me talking, this is my opinion, I think we sort of limped into the studio to do this pre-production, and we recorded a lot of the music down. There's some demos, that are unreleased. But it's unfortunate because there was a lot of good meat there.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't quite seal the deal to get it, to get,
sure.
Get it through the whole production phase and then to release it. And it was, it would have been really neat. I think it was like 12 songs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Something like 12, 13 songs. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I brought in a different style than the previous guitar player.
Right.
So the music that we were writing and then my take on those originals that he helped them write was certainly different. I'm not really a Randy Rhoads style type of guitar player. Love him, but it's not my.
Well, and then what was it? After that folded, you went down. You guys joined forces again for a bit. To do something.
Yeah. So
for like 4 or 5 years.
So the Black Rain thing came about for me about in '97, something like that. And I kind of came in and out of the band a couple of times. There's some meat there, but the just to 2000, which is when we recorded One or went into the studio to attempt to record that album. Shortly after that, Black Rain kind of had some different people coming in and out. We pressed the pause button for a moment, and we regrouped with a different singer and some different folks, and it changed up a little bit, and then. I started, at this time I started to do a lot of session work. I was taking on gigs from, some different folks coming into town. They needed a guitar player who did what I did. And so I would go, if the deal was right, time was right.
Pay me.
I'm there.
To make some money playing.
And I made a lot of really cool connections that way as well, that helped not only me gain a little bit of credibility in different spaces.
Sure.
But it also became an avenue for me to do not just session work with live gigs, but also in the studio.
Gotcha.
So,
That's good.
Yeah, it was kind of neat. And so I spent a lot of time doing that in the early 2000s.
Almost like more of a studio musician setup than anything else.
Yeah, and
Live performer.
Right.
Rather than I'm in a unit and I'm doing this.
A lot more of that, yeah. A lot more of that. And it was probably a good career move at the time. It was a good transition for me to...
Good learning experience, I bet.
I thought so. Yeah. It was, being able to play a lot of the session work, the live sessions were a lot of church performances. So Black Rain at some point had... It was kind of a revolving door of different qualified musicians. Some of those who had spent time in the studio, on the road with some of these different, like John Peakey and some other artists like that who are more in the gospel world.
Right.
So I was starting to connect and network with some of these folks, and by virtue of those relationships I was getting gigs.
Okay.
That somebody would call and say, "Hey, listen, $500, $700 for 90-minute performance, 45-minute performance, a couple rehearsals."
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
I'll take my money.
Right. And you come and you connect, you network, and then you get gigs, from some of those experiences as well.
So then around 2007, after you're doing this for a while, you head down to Atlanta.
I did.
Are you doing music down there? Did you plug into the scene at all? Or are you just kind of like working?
I was working.
Doing other stuff.
I had the day job that helped fund the guitars.
Sure.
And
that was that. You're like, I'm just going to focus on this. Was there a sour moment where you were like, I'm just, let me put this to the side for a bit? Like, you never give up music per se, but sometimes you're like, I need to not focus on this anymore. I need to kind of focus on where, like there have been times when I'm a teacher, and as much as I like gigging and stuff, I'm like, yeah, this is what I do. This is what pays the bills.
Right.
I've got to kind of focus on this for a bit.
Right. There's probably not one singular answer, but I'll try to frame it up like this: that yes, there was some level of it was time to decompress, right? Time to do something a little different, but also had an opportunity to do something a little different with my daytime job.
Yeah,
and so I took that opportunity and spent 2 years down there. And although I wasn't really tapped into the music scene as a player, I was visiting certain places and, getting a feel for the local art music scene. And then a close friend of mine, she was, doing some touring, and she came to Atlanta and she asked me if I would sit in with her on a couple of shows, and I did that as well. So it was pretty cool. It was a good experience. And I was, when I came back in 2009, it was I was ready to come back. So.
Good, man.
Yeah.
I always just always heard wonderful things about the Atlanta scene, but I don't really know anything about it besides having heard, Atlanta's got a kicking music scene.
Yeah. Well, and that feedback is that hearing that is right. They it's a little more organic, say, than Charlotte.
Yeah.
Charlotte's a bit more buttoned up in terms of the business, music business in Charlotte, if that's even a thing. But Charlotte has, you might say it's a little bit more corporate, feel here. In Atlanta, you always have a sort of a corporate aspect to some of the bigger cities, but there was sort of an organic, grassroots type of element that the city really got behind, and they're really cool places to play in functions and festivals and stuff like that. Something that we're not quite there yet here in Charlotte, which is unfortunate because as well as I do, there's a lot of good talent here. So
it's still a lot better than when I moved here.
Sure.
I mean, I always say when I first moved here and I was looking for a place to play, it was like there weren't that many.
What year, by the way, did you?
I got here in 2006.
Okay.
And
when I got here in 99, and I actually had played Charlotte before, obviously it was part of my circuit when I was with the rock bands.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of places. There used to be the Pterodactyl, there was a place called Rockies, and these were places that, were established, but you also had, when I got here in 99, there was a place up in Nodab called Fat City.
I'd heard of Fat City. I don't think I ever
it was
here when I got here.
Yeah, by 2006, it was, no longer I can't remember what year it kind of dissolved, but it was, I think, slightly before that.
And I have the feeling it was, before I got here, it seemed to be almost more original music. But even though I talked to the guys in Sponge Tone, they said, no, they were doing covers and original stuff too.
Right. And well, the Sponge Tones, they were one of the bands that could pull off any of that. They were, Steve and the guys, and I guess was Chris Gargis, I believe, was a drummer, I think. They could do whatever they wanted to, really. I mean, they were one of the more...
They were established.
Yeah. And so when I got here, like I said, Fat City, there were some other places like Uptown. There had a place, and these are really cool, by the way. They weren't, glamorous by any respect, but they were artist destinations, like the Moon Room. There was a place, really, really neat vibe. They did a lot of spoken word and, music, live music, whether it was band or, whatever. They were, so.
Oh, I was just going to say, as I feel like as the city started to grow here in Charlotte, if there was a leaning towards original stuff, as it started to grow, it became much more of a cover city.
I would agree with that. Yeah, observation is spot on, and
for better or for worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse. I have my opinions on that.
I mean,
but
I think it's a good thing, but it's hey, I'm gigging.
Right.
I'm not turning down gigs. I mean, I play a lot.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm like, to just have that opportunity to go play in bars and restaurants, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think that it depends on who you are, what your goal is, what you're trying to do. I mean, I have done that. I've stayed busy doing that in the past. I mean, in large part, that Orlando experience was 50-50. I mean, we had half our set was probably more than half was covers.
Yeah.
That's how we made money.
And look, there's a lot of working musicians out there, and just to be able to go and play and make, be able to fund yourself. And
that's how you have establishments like East Coast Entertainment.
Yeah.
They specialize in that,
Corporate and weddings and private events and bars, restaurants. I mean, that's what helps most of us musicians, who are not touring the world.
A lot of my buddies
make a living
are doing that. Yeah. I mean, some of my closest musical partners over the years they're on this, on those circuit corporate gigs, weddings, and they make good money, make a great living doing it.
And if you're able to, feed your artistic soul, writing original music, but you're doing all this other stuff, and you're able to feed that. I mean, that's wonderful.
Yep.
I mean, I always equate it to almost like actors. How many actors are out there who are not in the movies every day? They're on television, they're on commercials, and you don't know who they are.
Soap operas or something. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's such a good point.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, so, what feeds your soul,
All right.
That's a good point.
So you come back from Atlanta after a time, come back to Charlotte, and you're back with Charles.
Yeah, well, maybe immediately. Charles and I, we established a pretty healthy working relationship since the Black Rain days, and we kept in contact. We actually recorded some, acoustic music. I performed with him at some various shows. We did some international television stuff, and that was pretty cool. When I got back in 2009, I didn't immediately jump back into music. So I was back probably a few months, and then a buddy of mine, David, I grew up with, he was a fellow guitar player. He came down to Charlotte. We went to lunch. He came back, and he was catching up over the years. He's bringing a couple guitars. I show him some of mine, guitar buddy chat stuff, And he said, "Hey, man, I've always wanted to put a band together with you and Kenny." I was like, "Okay, well, call him up." I was thinking, Kenny's not going to, he's probably not going to be interested, but I said, call Kenny, and if he wants to do it, let's put something together. Call Kenny, and then he calls me back and said, Kenny's interested. And I'm like, okay. So we put together a band called Walking the Red, and we were probably 9-10 months, something like that. It's a pretty cool little project. We wrote maybe 10, 12, 15 songs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, stylistically, it was probably very traditional. Maybe you might say there was some Zeppelin, Deep Purple type of vibes going on.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun for what it was. I had a lot of fun. We wrapped that up, and then right after we wrapped it up, we went into the studio and recorded 4 songs that we wrote together.
Okay.
And we didn't release it. It was sort of just, I mean, I guess there was an element of posterity, right? You know, you go in and, you know, what do we have to show for their time together? And it was cool. I mean, had a lot of fun. And while I was doing that, was wrapping up, I was doing a acoustic show with Charles. We were opening up for, we were at the Evening Muse, and we were doing I think we were doing an opening set for a band called Still Life Static.
Okay.
And band was Dustin on the drums, Derek was on the keys, and Christopher Freeman was on the bass, and I think it was Chester. Chester was guitar player. So we opened up for them. And when we get off the stage, Chris comes over, and I'm talking to Chris, and I knew Chris from a long time ago. I didn't know him real well, but I'm chatting with him. I said, hey, man, you know, would you be interested in recording some bass for some stuff that I'm recording at home? Sure, give me a call. Cool. Connection made. And he did come over and record it. And then I'm giving you a lot here in short. So we did the acoustic gig, you know, and Charles and I would do occasional like that. He'd call me up, hey, you know, can you do this? Cool. But after that gig, now I'm establishing a relationship with Chris Freeman, recording and whatnot. And during this kind of 2, 3 month, 4 month window after that acoustic gig, Chris calls me up and he says, hey, listen, can you sit in for Still Life Static? Guitar player can't make a couple of shows. I was like, cool, send me the music. So I did a TEDx event with them and some other stuff and really cool stuff. And I'm gelling with the band, and, you know, then I go back home and to my, you know, my musical lair, you know. And then another phone call comes and he says, hey, you know, Derek's moved to Atlanta. He was one of their key songwriting partners, and would you be willing to come in and work with us, help us write some songs? And so I went in, Chester, Chris, Dustin, and I. Dustin was, you know, he was a great drummer, longtime Charlotte guy, a few different bands and stuff. So we did that for about 4 months.
Right.
We didn't record anything other than some garage stuff, writing some music. And then that kind of just dissolved, so to speak. Chris and I really liked Chris's approach to music, his songwriting, his bass playing, especially because he comes from sort of an old school approach. Really pocket, listens for the song, plays for the song, has the chops, but respects whatever's going on.
Okay.
He brings a little bit of that Jocko vibe.
Gotcha.
You know, he can do it, but you know, he's playing for the song, and I appreciate that. And he decorates it well. So Chris and I, as that project that I mentioned a moment ago, is kind of wrapping up, dissolving.
That's right. I
said, Chris, why don't we put together a band? You know, why don't we just, you know, I enjoy working with you. I like the way you think and your approach to music. We have, you know, I think enough commonality music-wise to maybe we can start our own thing. Yeah, I'm all about it. So before that, we started out kind of lightly looking around Charlotte and trying to figure out who we can, you know, meet and put together. And while we're doing this, I actually answered an ad, a Craigslist ad, I believe it was Craigslist, for a drummer, you know, who was trying to put together a Soul Live tribute band. And I like Soul Live, you know, it's like, man, that's cool, you know. If you're familiar with him, kind of like a, you know, funky, kind of like a fusion of funk, jazz kind of stuff. And I answered his ad, and I told Chris, I said, why don't we go meet Rob, this guy, this drummer? He's trying to put together his own thing. Maybe we can make something out of that, you know. So we meet with Rob at a place called Philosopher's Stone. It's no longer around.
I remember Philosopher's Stone.
P-Stone.
Gosh, where was that at?
It's over in Elizabeth.
Oh, that was, okay, that's across. Philosopher's Stone used to be right where the comic shop is from Heroes, where Heroes... Yeah, I'm a comic junkie.
No, that's okay. I'm not.
So right, maybe I know exactly where it is. Yeah.
Okay. It's right. It's right off of 7th Monroe, right there. So we get together with Rob. We meet him, and it was a good meeting. But we walked away. Everybody was like, it was cool. He's a cool dude, talented guy, obviously. Yeah. But Chris and I walked away. We were kind of like, well, we'll probably just continue trying to do our own thing, you know. And so, before we got a chance to really go down the route, Chris gets a call from Tony Groove 8. And Tony's like, hey, man, we need a bass player. Chris is like, okay, you know, I'll do it.
Right.
And I just assumed that he wouldn't have time to do anything. So I just forgot about it, you know. I told him, I said, you know, hey, good luck with it. You'll have fun. You'll probably make some money. And You'll go to San Francisco and play the Boom Room. And that'll be, you know, Boom Room or whatever. And it'll be cool. So about 3 weeks after he joined Groove 8, he calls me up and I'm walking into a restaurant called Villa Francesca in Uptown. It's no longer there. It's really good Italian, by the way. First place I ever had grandma's pie, grandma's pizza.
Grandma's slice.
Yeah, grandma's slice. And so anyway, I look down, phone's ringing. It's Chris. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? And we chit chat for a minute. He goes, hey, listen, I want you to know that I still want to put that band together. And I was like, hey, I'm down, man, but I figured, hey, with Groove 8, you're probably not going to have any time. And I just put this on the shelf, this idea on the shelf. He said, he goes, it's cool. I want to do this. I want to do original music. I want to write my own music. Groove 8 was an original band, but I think he wanted to kind of be a part of something like what we had talked about. So, and I was like, okay, well, I'm down, man. So I said, well, we gotta find a drummer.
Yeah.
And we got to find a singer. And I said, ding, ding, ding. I said, what do you think about Charles? I said, I'll call him up and, I'll pitch it to him. He said, oh, man, I love Charles' voice. I would love to work with Charles. So I said, cool. So I called Charles probably next day or something. I said, Charles, look, I know most of what I've done with you has been your deal.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning this new band. And I'm working with Chris, and I want to know if you would be willing to come and chat with us and see if it sounds like something you'd be interested in being a part of. And he said, sure, let me know a date and time. So we put together a date and a time at my place. I was living in Elizabeth at the time off of Hawthorne Lane.
Okay.
And so we set a date and time, and I was thinking, oh, man, we need a drummer. And I asked Chris, I said, well, you know anybody? And he said, well, not really. I guess I got a couple of people in mind because I just don't think, they got the capacity to do it. I said, okay. So I'm thinking, who am I going to call? Who am I going to call? I can't call this guy. I'll call Rob. And I'm thinking, if I call him, it's going to sound weird because I met him under the auspices of him putting together.
Sure.
And I don't want him to think now. I don't know. I had this weird feeling that if I call him, he's going to be like, hey, man, you're playing me or whatever,
Yeah.
But I did. I called him. I said, okay, I'm just going to, give him a call. And I did. I said, hey, Rob, I said, how's the band search going? It's not really going. It's like, oh, really? I said, yeah, not really getting any good leads, And I said, okay. I said, well, hey, me and Chris, we're putting together a band. We've got a singer. I said, would you be interested in coming to chat with us, see how it sounds? And he said, man, as long as the music's cool and there ain't no egos and everybody's vibing, I'm down. And I said, cool. This is the date, this time. It's like January of 2012. Everybody comes over to Hawthorne Lane and we talk and we meet. I bought some pizza, I think from Villa Francesca, and
it's a grandma slice.
Yeah, it's a grandma slice, and get 6-pack of beer, and we cut it up, and we agreed. Hey, man, it felt good. We got a feel for each other, and then we said, let's let's rehearse. Let's.
So you guys just talk? Did you play any at all?
Not at that point. I think the idea for me, and having done this, having been part of multiple projects, I wanted to be real careful. I was thinking, man, let's just see how people vibe with each other in a setting outside of music.
Yeah.
Because I want people to be cool with each other. I don't want it to be fake. I don't want it to be phony.
Sure.
And I don't want to be so enamored by somebody's ability that I'm willing to overlook the fact that they might be a real, whatever.
Well, you already know going in that the guys can play.
I knew Charles well enough. I knew Rob was really good. The deal was individually we're all cool. Let's see how we engage as four people talking. Do we have energy? Is there, what's it like? And so we did. We put it together, and we were there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just talking about what we've done and what we'd like to do. And it felt good. And so we put together a rehearsal date like a month out.
Okay.
February, I think it was. It's funny. I actually have I have recordings of the first rehearsal ever, and so
what do we do? Covers or are you just jamming?
Yeah. Well, so there's a month between when we meet and when we rehearse.
Sure.
So I'm excited. I'm like, okay, well, I want to come prepared because I think the goal for us was initially we wanted to write, record, and perform original music. Now, you sprinkle in some covers as you need to, but that was the purpose of the band. And so a month goes by, and during that month, I'm like, okay, I want to be prepared for this because we might get together and it may not, we got to have something. So I started to write out some music, and I took a couple of ideas with me, and I had it in my back pocket, in case, sometimes you're in an environment where people jam, they write music together, you do it right there on the spot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to have some stuff you bring in, someone brings in something, say, hey, here's an idea. Some people even bring in a whole song and say, I want you to play it just like this. Luckily, the Hawthornes were not like that. So I had put together a couple of songs. One song idea was what ended up being Moving Forward on the first album, and another idea that ended up being Spare Me Your Sorry. So I brought these in.
Gotcha.
We worked on those, and it felt great. I mean, everybody's vibing, jamming, and we're off to the races. That was how we started. The name of the band initially, the first few months, we didn't have a name. So Chris had this idea. He said, hey, here's the name of a band, Trinity Seed. And I thought it was a cool sounding name. I was like, man, that's a cool name, and it could have, ended up having multiple meanings. Sure. But in the South, there's a religious element, when you think of the Trinity, right? Mm-hmm. And although that wasn't really kind of the angle with the name, there was a certain flavor that was attached to us, when we first started out. So first gig was Double Door. We opened up for Groove 8, and we started down this path.
So it's around 2012.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're starting to write our own music, and we're starting to get some feedback, some good feedback and some constructive feedback on the vibe and stuff. And so we made a decision that we're going to release an album. We're writing music. We're in the process of writing it and recording it. And it was a long process, distance-based, because we didn't have a place to record live. So we made a decision that we needed a new name, and we put forth a couple of ideas. I didn't really have anything,
Grandma's Pizza.
Yeah, there you go. Could have been. It should have been that. But no, Rob came up with the name Hawthornes.
Yeah.
And I was like, Hawthornes? How'd you get that? He goes, that's where we all met, man. Hawthorne Lane.
There you go. I actually, when we'll get to it, but when Day was on episode 22 of the Queen City Music Podcast, which is back in 2019.
Yeah.
I asked him if it was named after the pizza place.
We get
which
that
is
too.
funny
Right.
that you had gotten pizza from a place, and now I'm thinking it's like,
Right.
well, you guys named that. He's like, no, funny enough.
It is.
So-
We've had that question asked, and I had nothing. I mean, I when I first heard the Hawthornes, it didn't really resonate with me.
Right.
I just didn't have a connection with the name.
Sure.
And I was, when I thought of it initially, I was thinking maybe maybe I could hear Alison Krauss doing, a Hawthornes band or something.
Yeah.
Could be Celtic. It could be bluegrass. It could be anything.
Yeah.
It's not rock.
Yeah.
It's certainly not Steely Dan stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't think, but Rob, when he shared, kind of where he came up with it, I guess it made sense, and I had nothing else, so we became the Hawthornes.
There you go. So you got the band together.
Yeah.
You got a name, and then when do you guys start getting into rehearsals and start getting all this stuff together? Do you just come in and start rehearsing right away and writing original stuff, or do you have ideas of just doing some cover stuff first?
Right. Well, so when I think, let me think about this for just a second. Once we became the Hawthornes, we put the finishing touches on what started out to be just a demo. Our intent was to do like a 3-song, 4-song demo. And once we got into the writing and recording process, we decided to just go ahead and do a full length. And we had enough material that, and we went ahead and recorded that first album, More Than Eyes Can See. And it was a fun process. It was a distance-based recording, though, because we didn't have a studio that we could record all the drums and bass in. So what would happen, in most cases, Rob would record the drums at home, and he would send me the drum tracks, and I would load them into my DAW, and then I would start recording the guitars. In some cases, maybe the bass would be next, and then the guitars just really depended on the song. And then once we had all the rhythm tracks and all the music, Charles would come to Rob's home studio up in Huntersville and record the vocals. And then I would fashion a lead or something after that. So we did all of this distance. It came out, we self-produced it, self-recorded it. It's
great.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. It was a fun experience.
Had you guys done this before? Like, were you guys really good at mixing and
I mixed it, and I was not very good at it. So when people hear it, I take the L for the, unfortunately, but it, I think it was, we were really proud of the effort. It was really pretty awesome experience. And, I think there was a lot of confidence building that came out of recording it, certainly for me, of being able to jump back into something serious. And, I had a sort of something to prove to myself, I guess, that I could still be a part of a project, a fun project that wrote music, and I could still play at a decent level,
And you're playing with some wonderful players. I mean, everybody's really talented in that
absolutely.
group.
I mean, when it's a roll of the dice when you start putting together a group of guys. There's, you have your element of how well do people enjoy being around each other,
right? And
then how well do you play together? And we struck gold because both of those things were very similar. We got along, and we enjoyed writing music together, and we could do it, and we fed off each other. So
how long is that? The original lineup is only together a year with years. Charles in there, or Walter.
2 years.
2 years.
Yep.
Okay, and then Charles, or Walter Charles, he decides that he's going to leave, or he's got other things going on.
Yeah. So around the time as we were wrapping up that first album production and getting it ready to fly off the shelves of your local music store, Charles was starting to get involved in. He was. He had started a new church. He was heavily involved in the church. And as you can imagine, it takes a lot of time to do something like that. And so as that, I think that became an important focus for him. And so he started to go in that direction, and we supported it. And we were an incredible part of our story. And I was extremely happy that we got a chance to record together, to write together, produce that first album. I was looking forward to number 2 with the Hawthornes, but we went in different directions, and so then we started a search pretty quickly. It seemed like it lasted 10 years. It's probably about 6 months, 8 months. Yeah. And we tried out a lot of different folks, and I wish it would have been really neat had we thought about recording some of this. Probably would have got around some permission steps there with some of these folks, but some of it was really impressive. Some of it was really funny.
Were there people in town that you knew, or people just show up?
We had put an ad out, I think, both in Craigslist and Facebook, and we got a decent level of response, and most of it was local folks who had they had done something on their own or been a part of a previous project. Some people that came in had never done anything before ever. Yeah. And so that was interesting.
Had you guys, I don't really know, but had you guys had a little bit of local notoriety at that point where, when you were looking for a singer, that you got a lot of responses?
Well, what we were doing wasn't your maybe your everyday situation. It was a unique type of environment. We were...
Meaning the music?
The music was very unique.
Okay.
The music that we were bringing together wasn't just something maybe that people would want to do. Right. And some people may not have had the inclination and maybe in some cases maybe weren't particularly skilled to come in and help us move it forward. Right. But we took people on. We brought in different people, a mix of people, a range of backgrounds, and we had one person who we thought we were going to move forward with. And it, one of the things that we were thoughtful about how we set up these rehearsals. And as we were narrowing it down to the final one or two, part of the process was, now that we feel like you could do this, and we asked people to come in with an idea of their own, and that we would see how the energy was, the chemistry was, could we work something out? And then we sent them a song that we were working on with Charles prior, that had not been completed. We sent it. It was a song idea.
Could do.
Bring it in. That's how we approached it. And some people were up to the challenge of, hey, I've got a melody. I've wrote a chorus, and they bring it in, and then some people had really interesting ideas that we would work on as a band. We got through all of this. We narrowed it down to one person. The next phase, whoever kind of made it through, you can write a song with us and we can write a song with you. There was the next phase was let's do like a scaled back open mic night. We would go either to Lake Norman, or we would go to Smokey Joe's, and we'd get on the stage and we would play a few songs together. Okay. So how does it translate live? And so the person that we thought, was we were going to go with it, it just didn't translate like we wanted it to. Gotcha. Live. And around the time that we were making that final decision, I got this, out of nowhere, I got this text from this guy, and he's like, "Hey, I'm friends with Case. He says you're looking for new band members." Well, look at this. I'm driving down the road, and of course I'm driving slow. Yeah. I'm at a stop sign when I'm reading my text.
Just in case anybody's listening.
Yes. And I'm like, okay. And my text back was like, "We are, but like, what are you, what instrument or what are you referring to? Because you didn't tell me what you're doing." And I said, "Oh yeah, my bad. I'm a singer, and I'm looking for a band." And I said, "Oh well," and I was very honest. I said, "Hey, listen, I thank you for reaching out. I would love to network with you. I'd like to talk to you." And we are sort of in the final phases of this deal here. So I'm not real sure this will, that we'll be able to, kind of bring you in on this, but maybe we can network, And he was like, cool, I appreciate it. This was Ade. And I said, by the way, we've got we're doing this kind of scaled back open mic thing next Thursday or whenever it was with the person that, we think we're going to move forward with. And, you come out and hang out with the band. I think it would be really cool, to meet you in person, and I'll introduce you to the guys, and he was like, yeah, absolutely. I'll be there. He worked uptown at the time. Mm-hmm. And so he came to the show, and before the show, I got a chance to meet him, talk to him, really, Ade's very charming, he's a smart guy. Yeah, he is. And so I introduced him to the fellows, and then we got on stage to do our set. And, one thing led to another. And then I called Ade. I said, hey, why don't you come on and bring your notepad and I'm sending you a song. This is how we're doing it. Write some lyrics to this song, melody. It's all yours. Do whatever you want to do. Bring it in, and then be prepared to bring an idea that you have, and we'll flesh it out. And that song was After the Dance, which is on the CD, and that was his introduction. And it was something to behold.
Well, let's take a listen to that.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned it, we'll come back and talk about it. But
sure.
This is After the Dance by the Hawthornes.
What my eyes can see, you're the best thing in here, baby. Got to swallow my fear, 'cause I want you next to me. So we'll take a shot of confidence. Girl, I just can't miss my chance. I'm holding out my hand to you, pretty baby, and I'm asking you to dance. We move from side.
Man, I love that track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of neat.
I like that whole album,
Thank you.
actually. When Ade was here back in 2019, we talked about some of the stuff. Am I correct? I can't remember specifically, but you guys didn't have a keyboard player before Ade came in, and then was he a keyboard player that added the other, besides his vocals, the instrument to the group? Would I be correct in that?
Yeah, it's yes, and it's kind of an interesting path to that, because Rob, our drummer, is a very talented pianist, know, and when we recorded both albums, Rob, the first album didn't have a whole lot of keys, but he would add textures, and the second album, we incorporated a lot more keys, which Rob played in the studio, and then Ade would facilitate those parts live.
Right.
And then as we wrote additional material after the self-titled album, there were some songs that Ade was writing with us, and he wrote some of those key parts. So yeah,
nice.
Yeah,
I'm kind of like in awe, just because I remember when I moved to Charlotte in 2006. I know you guys didn't get the band together till a few years later, but you guys were talked about in such esteem that you were one of those hot bands in Charlotte. Like you got to see the Hawthornes. You've got to go see these guys play. Besides being great guys, just talented musicians. What a good band. And I was so happy when I started the podcast years later that Ade came in, and I think he was the only one who was available at that point to come in. You guys all had other things going on that day, and he came on and talked, and it was awesome to speak with him.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. It's always good to. It's good to hear the love, that there's, a level of appreciation for something that you do. As a fellow musician, there's nothing like, people embrace and enjoy what you do and what you have to offer. So that's pretty awesome.
So what were you guys doing when you guys had gotten the second recording out? Were you guys at this, and this is before the music industry went really crazy, were you guys trying to get some label support from somewhere? Were you guys trying to tour regionally? What were you guys doing at that point?
Well, the mission for us was really basic, right? So our goals were really always to be able to write, record, and perform music that felt natural, that was genuine, authentic, any of those descriptors, right? And there were a few challenges that may be unique to us, not the least of which was stylistically we were all over the map. So, you might say that when you listen to the Hawthornes, it's like having, someone might have on their iPod or whatever they listen to their music on, they have all of these different songs that span, different genres.
Right.
We were sort of that experience for a listener. You were going to get rock, you're going to get funk, you're going to get a little hip hop, you might get a little ska or reggae in there. It's going to be an experience. And so that was, I say in some regard, it's a challenge because, how do you fit a band like that into the circuit? It is also something that helps set us apart, at the same time. So, there are certain opportunities that we got because we were who we were.
Sure.
The goal for us was also, as I mentioned, being able to write, record, and perform. Another challenge to that became, we weren't 25 years old.
Sure.
Right. And we were marching to our own beat. So although the idea of having someone come in and say, listen, we would love to offer you a deal, we're going to manage you and all this. The reality is that in the area that we're in, Charlotte, that's at that time wasn't really a viable expectation.
Sure.
So we took on a lot of the work ourselves, whether it was production, promotion, recording. We managed this ourselves. We were an entity. We put together an LLC together, and we became, a business. And we did all of the on stage activities, off stage activities, in studio, in rehearsal, out of studio, out of rehearsal. We did all that.
And that's after, you guys are a little older. Mm-hmm. You're all knowledgeable now.
Yeah.
We're approaching this and it's DIY. Before, these last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, like that the industry has gone completely DIY for artists.
Right.
Which is really kind of crazy.
Right. We knew that we were going to have to invest resources and time,
right,
to move it along, and we did, and we had a lot of fun doing it. We were able to perform on stages, that were really humbling experiences, and we did one of our very first shows when we put the Hawthornes together was at the Democratic National Convention here in Charlotte back in, what was that, 2000?
I don't even remember.
I don't remember the year, but we, 12 or 13, whatever it was. And we had a corner that they set us up on, and it was really cool. It was really cool. And then, we built on that, of course, throughout the beginnings of the group and being able to, play certain important shows, and then being able to do the Confluence event, which you saw us at. That was
a great show, man.
Yeah, thank you. And it was really exciting, and we were ecstatic to be able to, someone reaches out and say, hey, listen, we're going to put together this inaugural show, and we'd like your band to play, to be considered for that. It's like, wow, and it kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't like we were politicking for it, so it was a great opportunity. It was a heck of a show.
Yeah.
We also, in 2019, Eddie Z, who's, of Playroom fame and Charity Case band that he put together, he had asked us. We had been a long-term tenant at the Playroom, and he had asked us if we would be interested in this idea, this vision he had for this Austin City Limits, but at Charlotte. He wanted to have this music show that was, that he would record at the Playroom in the studio, and he's got a very nice setup, by the way. He would video it, record it, and then the local affiliate, ABC affiliate, would pick it up. And so he asked us if we'd be interested in doing the inaugural event, and he had 2 artists, and we were one of those, and we did. We played it, and it was back in 2019. COVID happened,
and shut everything
down. So the episode did come out, but not with a lot of fanfare. And ABC stuck it on it, in the middle of, whatever. It was like a Sunday night at an unpopular time or something. I don't remember, but it didn't get any. I got the only reason I even knew. I mean, somebody said, "Hey, listen, there," somebody texted me and said, "Hey, I heard da 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 da." Oh man, okay. And then after it played, I didn't even get to see it.
Oh wow,
I never got to see it. And then a buddy of mine, who's a local Ludwig drum rep, he texted or sent me a message or something on Facebook, and he's like, "Man, that was cool. I saw, I'd never heard you guys before." And, you're getting all of these, responses of people who got a chance to see it. It was pretty cool.
I'm just wondering why, COVID happened. He should do that again and just put it as a YouTube channel with.
And he may have some ideas. I haven't spoke to Eddie lately, but he may have some. I don't know what he's got. Great. Yeah, it would be really cool. And I think once, maybe perhaps what could have happened. I'm just speculating here. Is that maybe ABC just they set it on the shelf or something, and then maybe
COVID happened. That was the big story.
Yeah, it was
put
the big
everything
story.
down for a while.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun to do something like that. It was really, really kind of neat,
So I'm just, not to jump ahead, but it was a short time, not even later, in 2019, the Hawthornes then go on hiatus.
Yeah.
What was it, because of COVID and the ability, that you all got into your own little worlds, and then?
I wish I could blame it on COVID. None of us had a crystal ball that that 2 months or 3 months later that world was going to shut down. Right. I think for us, there were a lot of things that were going on with the Hawthornes toward that last year.
Right.
By that time, Rob had moved on to something a little different. He was becoming the local go-to person, when you needed some awesome keys or drums or whatever. And he was that became a part of his journey.
Sure.
And we brought in a new drummer, and we were writing some material, some really cool stuff that, hasn't really been recorded properly. But, and when 2019 was kind of winding down, we were doing some shows. We did the Eddie Z recording.
Yeah.
Confluence happened maybe a couple of months before that. And I think we got to a place where it felt like it was time to press the pause button, and maybe step away from it for a little bit.
Right.
And regroup. And then COVID happened, and even if we were ready to come back together in 2020, there wasn't a whole lot of movement going on for a while. So I think we were a victim of maybe some of the length of the hiatus was impacted maybe by some of that as well. So we're not broke up. We just hit the pause button.
Well, the funny thing is that then you guys got back together to do a show.
Yeah.
Was it for Old Town Public House?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, in last year.
Yeah.
I was so mad I couldn't get to come see it because
I'm mad you didn't show up. I'm mad I didn't.
It's like, the Hawthornes are playing. Because I saw you talking about it, and I was just like, oh man, I got a gig that night.
Well, it's interesting. What happened was Case Monday, who was, ran OTPH and who's heavily involved in, supporting the arts and music up in the Lake Norman area. By the way, another really great ambassador for music and for us, the Hawthornes. He really got behind us and was the reason that Ade joined the band, because he gave Ade my number, by the way. There's a quick plug for Case there, so thank you, Case. Case had made a post on Facebook that I just happened to see, and it was, he was talking about, after years of doing this, we're going to be closing the doors. And I was like, oh man, so I told him, I said, man, I said, I'm really kind of shocked to read this. It's such a cool place for, for people to come together and listen to live music. And I said, thanks for allowing us to be part of that story. And he was like, man, it would be so great if you guys would come play, to help close this, close this out. And I half jokingly, I tagged Ade in my comment to him. I said, hey, if you can convince Ade to do it, and I joke with Ade a lot. I always pull him in. And he's like, hey, I'm catching strays here. What's going on? But I said, hey, if you can convince Ade, maybe we can do that, And so Ade texted us like the next day or something. He said, hey guys, I really want to do this. Can we do it? So everybody carved out the time. We got together for 2 rehearsals and pulled off 2 45-minute sets.
Oh, man, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a lot of fun.
So you guys do the show at the Old Town Public House. Close it out. Are there any plans for future shows?
Well, nothing that I can speak of right now, but I'll tell you, if the timing and the opportunities line up just right. You never know.
Well, we'll ask Ade.
Yeah, well,
maybe he's listening.
He's the key, man. I'm telling you, Ade is the key. And I have to. I'll tell you, I've never been one to try to do these type of environments where I come in to do a podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not really my strong point. It hasn't been my strong point. So Ade, when he joined the band, one of the great things about him is he really stepped into this role, this pivotal role, as being the lead singer.
And talking.
Yeah, and he was really excited about being in the group. I don't think he, talking, I don't want to speak for Ade, but knowing him, I don't think it was never important for him to be like the spotlight, under the spotlight, but he does really well in those environments. And so, a lot of times when an interview would come up or somebody wanted to talk, it's like, Ade, you got this, right? So, and, he's a certain way with representing our band and did it at a very high level.
Well, anybody listening, once again, you can go back and check out that past episode,
absolutely.
episode 22 with Ade. Well, you didn't do too bad today, man, coming in and talking, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Before I don't want to close things out quite yet, but what have you been up to lately? So the Hawthornes are on a hiatus.
Yeah.
Did that performance, but you've been doing some other stuff on your own. What have you been working on, Mike?
So, aside from like some session work that I've been doing, over the years, I have been recording and collaborating a little bit with Joel from the Pepper Club, Tipsy Gypsy Days.
Okay, wow.
We've stayed connected over the years.
Taking back into the past.
Yeah. He called me up, I think it was back in January, and he said, hey, let's get together, grab lunch, bring your guitar. And I was like, okay, cool. So I bring my guitar up, we go grab lunch, and then he says, okay. He asked me to sit me down. He's got his own studio, and he's quite active. He not only writes a lot of his own music, which spans rock, and he also has his own bluegrass band. And what he asked, when I got there, we sit down, he said, do you have any song ideas? And I said, I got a lot. And I said, I probably got 500 song ideas, And, but I said, what do you thinking about something in particular? He said, well, I've got a riff, and I said, okay, let's hear it. And he breaks out this riff, and he says, let's do something with it. And I said, well, I learned it, and I was like, okay, cool. What do you, he said, okay, here's your headphones. I've got my headphones. He goes to the mixing board and he says, let me write a quick drum line for this.
And go.
That's basically how it happened. And so, it's been really cool to pick up on this collab with Joel because we're in different places, right, musically, but we always have some center that brings us back. We, as I indicated, I love to be able to bring a lot of different flavors into my playing, but at the end of the day, I'm pretty much a basic rock and roll guitar player, so I can pull on that when I get together with certain folks, and with Joel, it was one of those things where he trusts me enough that when I go home after we recorded these foundational rough sketches, he sends me the drums and a scratch bass along with what I recorded, and he says, I need a solo, I need a B part or whatever, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do something really different, and I sent it back some ideas to him, and I said, just be open-minded, and so he was, and we're working on some stuff right now, nothing polished and final, but some interesting demo stuff that we're working on.
Well, you did send me a demo to listen to. Can we listen to some of it right now?
Yeah.
This is something old, something new, something blue?
Old, new, borrowed blue.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
All right, let's take a listen to this demo. I love it.
Thanks.
Do you have a band name? Are we going back to Tipsy Gypsy?
I don't know. We haven't quite got that far with it yet. We're just in the initial stages of writing some music, so it's very raw.
Let's take a listen.
You got it.
Walking down the aisle of people she barely knew, staring right in my face and swore love was true. If you wanted time just to think it through, was something wrong with me or something wrong with you?
Mike, that's completely different than the Hawthornes.
Totally.
You're really leaning into rock roots, man.
You got it.
I love it. So I'm curious, Mike, we're going to start closing stuff out, but how do we get in touch with you? Are you on social media as Mike the musician, or is it just your private, personal page, I should say?
It's a great question. I can be found in a couple of different places. I do have my personal Facebook page, which I keep mostly to
personal.
Music. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Personal
it's personal site, but I use it to talk about music and share, my abstract ideas and thoughts on music and maybe some other things too. But I can be reached there if people would like to take a look at that. It's Mike Guitarzan Prescott, and that's how you'll find me. And I believe the current location is Lagos, Nigeria. So if you're pulling it up and you're like, I don't see it in Charlotte, that's why.
There you go.
And then, of course, I still tend to the Hawthornes Facebook page. And so we still get a lot of traffic there and messages. And so if you'd like to see what's going on with the Hawthornes, listen to some of the latest ideas, performances, and keep in touch with us there, you can do that by visiting that Facebook page, which is, I think it's the Hawthornes Music.
Okay.
So
I'll find it and put all the links in the show notes. Do you have a personal webpage or anything, or Instagram? Do you do any of that?
Yeah. You can find that all through at my Mike Guitarzan Prescott Facebook page.
Okay.
My socials are there.
All right, cool, man. That sounds great. I'll put all the links in the notes and we'll get it all going.
Got it.
All right, Mike, thanks for coming in and talking, man. I really appreciate it. It's been awesome getting to know you and finding out all the stuff that you've been up to.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to come and chat with you.
All right, man. Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to episode 98 of the QCMP, and I hope you'll go back and check out past episodes. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our local partners, Charlotte New Music at charlottenewmusic.org, Blacker the Berry Lemonade at btblemonade.com, and our newest local partner, The Evening Muse at eveningmuse.com. And if you'd like to become a local partner, touch base with me at, you guessed it, qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Until next month, get out there and support the local music scene by hearing some of the talented artists who call our city home.